Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special, slightly later edition of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. I am Cade Kennedy. We are in a full house tonight, and there's a good reason for it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is August. College football is on the horizon. We are finally almost here. We're almost to my favorite time of the year. We get college football on. So much to talk about. We had GAC Media Days for Division II for those of you who follow us for Northwestern sports. We'll cover that at a later time once we get closer to Northwestern's football season. Tonight, mainly focusing on D1, the big boys, FBS, whatever you want to call it, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, so much more. We thank you for tuning in as always. But before I get into anything else, it's time to introduce everybody because we have some familiar faces back tonight that we have not seen in a good while. So as I turn it over to our guests, how are you all doing this evening?
Doing good.
Yeah.
Doing good, Kate.
All
Back
right.
up here ready to talk some college football with the boys.
There you go.
And I'm very glad to be back. I was out in LA for over a month. And
Yeah,
it was a
causing
great
chaos.
experience. Yeah, literally the first week, basically within the first week I was gone, everything happened with all the Pac-12 news, now the realignment stuff happening, then obviously major different news in whether it be the NBA or really anything else. Just a lot of chaos. Then obviously it eventually died down, but still it's like the fact that I was only gone for less than a week and everything went wrong.
Yeah.
Depending on your point of view.
I'm doing very well. Ready to dive into college football here. Obviously, right around the corner. So, I'm excited. I'm excited for another sport to get underway here for me to watch.
I am excited as well. Like I said earlier, one of my favorite times of the year. Kind of having to cock my head here to look around because when you have 4 people in a setup that you got used to 2, you have to change things quite a bit. So the last 15 minutes, that explains why we're a little bit late. Trying to fix things here. I've got to kind of do the peacock strut out here to look. But everything is going well as I flip it over. There it is, the beautiful conference schedule for ESPN. August 27th, folks. It's a day that'll go down as a very happy day. Why? Football's back. That's all you need to say. Need I say more? Keep saying words. I don't know, whatever I want to fit in here. But it all starts at 11 a.m. with a game no one would actually really care about, but we're all going to see
Yes.
Austin Peay and Western Kentucky, 11 a.m., CBS Sports Network. It's going to be great.
I guarantee you I have money down on this game in some fashion or another. I guarantee it. Maybe a little bit of a degenerate like that.
Hey, that's okay. We allow degens in this room. We're all sports fans. We're not all sports gamblers unless you 3 are hiding something from me, but I don't know.
Nope.
All righty. Well, I know we got Tyler here. We got our local draft king, so to speak.
Yeah.
You got to wink into the camera there. But I guess we should just get straight into it. I know we can dwell on these games for a long time, but I want to get into the conferences before we do anything else, just to kind of set the tone with what we're looking at this year. And what better way to start than the conference we probably know the most about, all being fans of 2 of the 10 teams in this conference, the Big 12. Notable for its 10 teams, soon to finally be 12. Looking at the Week 1 schedule starting September 1st, West Virginia taking on Pitt, 6 o'clock ESPN, and Central Michigan coming back to Stillwater. Fingers crossed no officiating errors this time. Maybe the Big 12 will finally realize don't bring MAC officials to a Big 12 game. Tennessee Tech and Kansas that Friday at 7 on ESPN+. TCU taking a late-night Pac-12 After Dark tour going to Boulder for 9 o'clock ESPN. And then the full slate begins. Iowa State at home, Oklahoma at home, K-State, Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas. Everyone playing their kind of body bag games, so to speak. So many fun storylines just getting into it, and I will turn it over to you guys wherever you want to start. I am ready to just get into it and talk about whoever.
I'd say pretty much out of all the main non-con games, obviously that first week for the Big 12, you got the big matchup between Pitt and West Virginia, old rivalry between those two, especially from the Big East, even before they joined the Big East, to obviously having to play against each other all the time. But it's going to be fun, obviously, for Oklahoma State. everyone's basically hoping we beat the living crap out of Central Michigan after what happened last time. They came down. Oh boy, that's gonna satisfy a lot of fans if we get that win.
You don't know. Cooper Rush might show
I was
up.
about to say, like, you better hope Cooper
That's
Rush
why-
has ghost and possess somebody.
I mean, it's on the players. They got better come out more prepared and stuff, right?
Yep.
They shouldn't let it come down to one last play. I mean,
Exactly.
obviously, it was a bad call at the end or bad fishing at the end, but it shouldn't have been even that point to begin with.
Nope.
No, so Cade, out of those week 1 matchups, though, you said the body bag matchups. That's pretty much true for everybody. 2 games out of those to watch, I think the most. West Virginia Pitt, I think, tops it just because that's going to tell us a lot about West Virginia straight away. That's going to be actually a good Pitt team. I know they lost Kenny Pickett, top receiver in the country, Jordan Anderson. But just like everybody else, they said, oh, hey, transfer portal, let's bring over some guys.
Yeah.
They got Slovis, kid from USC at quarterback. So in West Virginia themselves, JT Daniels makes his debut under center for the Mountaineers. So,
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, to your point, an amazing transfer portal matchup. This is going to be one of those games to highlight the transfer portal
Yeah.
more than any other game. Get it started with the backyard brawl.
And then other than that, TCU at Colorado, I don't think Colorado's going to be that good, but it's the first game in quite a while that TCU's under a new head coach. So how's that going to play out? They're projected to have some talent, a good quarterback battle going on there between former OU guy Chandler Morris and then Max Duggan. Interested to see who comes out of that. Those 2 games will at least tell you a little something, not everything. Everybody else, if you don't, win by 40 or 50, it's always a disappointment. You're like, what are we doing? Week 1, season's over.
Yeah. I mean, I have had that feeling before, Tyler, being an OU fan as well. We have seen way too many games that have had that similar script, whether we want to talk about Tulane last year, whether we talk about one that I always remember, Utah State in 2010, or Air Force as well under the Bob Stoops era. Just don't schedule Mountain West teams, apparently. Or teams from Louisiana. Don't do either.
Well,
Some
what
bad
Texas do,
happens.
they picked up Monroe after having a tight one with Lafayette last year.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Texas?
I don't know. They got to give Quinn Ewers his debut game. They got to give him the one tune-up game before Alabama, Tyler.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that one in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But I think the main team we've got to start with, I would say it's weird saying they're the best team to start with, but the Baylor Bears. I would say that's probably where we should start. The defending conference champions of the Big 12 pulling their schedule up, as we mentioned, starting with Albany, but an immediate test going out to BYU the second week of the season. That's going to be a fun one. Texas State, Iowa State, getting further in the schedule, another giant one, the Big 12 championship rematch with OSU. Then you get a bye week, a Thursday night in Morgantown, then another home game against Kansas, big rivalry at Texas Tech, then going into Norman, getting Kansas State, rivalry game with TCU, and going to Texas. A bit of an interesting end to the season it's going to be for Baylor.
It's probably one of the tougher ones on the schedule. I know it's like you get pretty much your 2 big tests, actually probably 3 because it's always hard to play in Ames. But obviously you got BYU, then you get an easy-ish game against Texas State because you take everything for granted. But then you got to play at Ames, and then luckily you get a home game with Oklahoma State, and you got to hope that defense is ready for obviously that OSU offense, obviously like how they were last year. I expect Baylor their defense to pretty much do what they did last year. They mostly brought everybody back, and that offense is pretty much loaded. So and I've already told you this, Cade. I fully expect them to make it back to the championship game, whether it be running the table or dropping a game or 2. I still expect them to make it back because I expect chaos to ensue. But they easily have probably the hardest schedule going into the last part of October into November. I mean, because you have to play OU, K-State, TCU, which that's a wild card team, I think, and then you got to play Texas. That's already a hard schedule to deal with, and we'll find out. Obviously, when we get to them, we'll find out how Texas will be when they actually start playing.
So I'm going to take the opposite approach. I think you're going to find out who this Baylor team is from the beginning. You go at BYU. That's obviously going to be a tough game. Any game at Iowa State's going to be trouble there for Ames. And then you get Oklahoma State before the bye. You'll find out in those 3 games who they are, and then coming out, a tough Thursday matchup against West Virginia. So I think you'll see who this Baylor team is right right off the gate there. And if they struggle early on, I think that would kind of tell you how they're going to do against those tougher games late in the year.
Well, Connor, you mentioned that defense, and rightfully so. They do bring back a good amount, but you lose Jalen Petrie on the back end. He really was responsible for helming one of the best secondaries, not only in the conference but in the country. So that's a big loss. But you mentioned Andrew BYU right there. That is a team, folks. I'm telling you, they've got a Heisman contender in Jaron Hall at quarterback. He was off to an electric start last year. They were undefeated the first half of the season, and then he got injured, and they had some other injuries that plagued him, and BYU kind of fell off. If that guy's healthy, like Andrew said, you're going to know by the BYU game. You will know by the time the clock hits 0 on that BYU game whether this Baylor team's legit or not.
But it'll also come down to that offense. See how well they'll do with I forget what's
you got Shapen at
Shape,
quarterback.
Yeah,
we'll see how Shape, because he never played a full season. He only played a few games because Bohannon was injured,
right.
And then Bohannon played the bowl game. But obviously, Miranda made it known, hey, Shape's our guy. See, you don't have Bohannon now, so now we'll see how good Shape will be throughout a whole season. Because when he played, he was fantastic.
Well, and that's the other thing. He, in camp, that was an open battle, between him and Bohannon, and he dethroned Bohannon. Yeah. I mean, so if that's an upgrade at that position, they were already, I wouldn't say quite explosive on offense, but with that defense, they were good enough. And Shapen, from all reports this year, guys, he could throw it. He could launch that thing, and maybe not has the escapability, the run set that Bohannon would, but
I mean,
if you got a legit slinger back there.
I mean, with how he played in the Big 12 championship game in that first half, he was playing really good. He was picking apart the defense. Then obviously, when that second half happened, OSU made the adjustments to stop him, and Shape couldn't really do as much. But I expect Shape to obviously play much better than how he played and be able to play. That's why I have them as the favorite to at least make it back to the championship game. Obviously, and the thing is, I wasn't saying early on that you wouldn't see. I'm just saying the toughest part of their schedule was the latter part, for the most part. I mean, they'll be tested by BYU. You got to go to Ames. You got to play Oklahoma State. But by their end of the season, will determine can they keep it going. That's where I was meaning by that. Because we were in agreement on the whole thing.
Another thing about Shapen that I think doesn't get mentioned as much but should be is his consistency.
Right.
To be a freshman, to come in, to throw 17 straight completions, to look like a young Tom Brady out there, it felt like at times. My personal opinion. I will put that on a T-shirt. Hey, young Tom Brady.
They've had some good quarterbacks. Say Bryce Petty, man. Yeah. Like, Bryce Petty was legit. Let's go there. He was.
Nick Florence. We're bringing Nick Florence back.
Oh, Lord.
Remember that guy? No one does. I do. No one else does. He beat K-State, though. But we're off to a great start with this. But I am excited to see how Baylor does this year. I know we don't talk about their offense enough. One guy I'm excited to see, first-team tight end Ben Sims. I'm excited to see how he looks in this offense this year. Baylor's more of a zone scheme. They love to run the football a lot. I'm excited to see if they can keep that rushing attack up. But if they can do what I think they can, they'll be a Big 12 title contender easily. They may even be playoff contenders. We saw last year they came out of nowhere at the end, it felt like. If you were paying attention to the Big 12, you expected it. But I think they have a bigger target on their back this year as well.
Oh, for sure. Nobody's going to catch them off guard. In terms of, you see Baylor on the schedule, you're going to say, we got to give them our best. I guarantee you that West Virginia game, if they get through those first few weeks okay, that's always a tough one coming off a bye week. We saw it with you and teams in the past, man. You come off a bye week, you got to go play in Morgantown. I don't care how bad West Virginia is. That's always tough.
Especially on Thursday night.
Yeah, Thursday night.
It's a terrible night. Terrible.
It's like Morgantown's not a fun place to play.
It absolutely isn't. But moving on to our next team to talk about, we've talked about Baylor. Let's talk about who played them in Arlington last year, Oklahoma State. We mentioned it already, starting the year with Central Michigan. They get a little Pac-12 test, I guess you'd say, with Arizona State coming to town the next week after that, and then their real gimme game against Arkansas Pine Bluff the week after that. Everyone gets their Big 12 ESPN Plus game. You got to love it. Everyone gets one. Then a bye week, going down to Waco. That's a good time to use your bye week if you can get one scheduled right before the defending conference champs. Always a good time to get one. Texas Tech comes to town in a – I'll get your opinion on this route later, but is Texas Tech a rivalry? That's a question to think about for you two Oklahoma State fans over there. OSU taking a trip down to TCU, getting homecoming, playing Texas, then going to Bill Snyder Family Stadium to take on K-State. That's going to be a sneaky good game. If you didn't think last year's game was good, this one's going to be a pretty good one this year. And then going to Kansas, everyone's favorite high school to play at in the Big 12. Iowa State coming home, taking a trip to Norman for Bedlam, and ending it with West Virginia at home. I'm going to make fun of Kansas Stadium. I've been there. It's a high school stadium. It's a glorified high school stadium.
Yeah.
They finally got rid of the track, though.
Yeah.
But I want to get your guys' opinion on this because I've seen this ferocity at least sometimes on social media. Now, granted, social media can be completely different. But Oklahoma State and Texas Tech, I keep seeing people saying it should be a rivalry.
No.
The similar hand signs. You both have a masked rider that runs on a black horse. I mean, that's all the similarities we got right there. They both have black in their color scheme. Each side claims they stole the other's tradition.
Oh.
Texas Tech claims that OSU took Tech's traditions in the 70s. OSU says, no, we started this back in the 40s. What are you talking about? Series is tied at 23-all. To me, that's a rivalry right there. Not a big one, maybe the level of Tulsa or something, but that's at least a little regional rivalry.
Well, I mean, I think technically anything in the conference is a rivalry, and that's what people are searching for. But, I mean, going to OSU, I mean, there wasn't really any Tech stuff going on. Like, I'd say Baylor is more hated. I'd say Texas is more hated. I'd say, obviously, Oklahoma is more hated. So I want to put Texas Tech up in the top half of OSU's rival.
It's like I would view in regards to rivalry, K-State's more of a problem because every time we always play each other, it's always a dogfight, or they steal one from us. It's pretty much just how. The thing is with Tech is that maybe if Leach was still the thing, you can make a case, but ever since Leach left, OSU has only lost like maybe twice to them. Every time OSU's beaten the crap out of them.
Yeah, I don't think they lost. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think they lost them when I was there.
They lost in 18. That was the one.
18? Yeah, I guess.
That was when we went 6-6. But it was one of those. It's like any OSU fan, even my dad is like.
Well, your dad did chime in. He said Gundy was never a pirate like Mike Leach. So.
Oh, and by the way, correction on mask rider, we don't have a mask rider, so I don't.
You have Bullet. That's close enough.
Yeah, but we were doing that way before. So
there you go. That's what I'm saying. Texas Tech would say the opposite.
I think the problem is, not being an Oklahoma State fan myself, I think Tech is just nobody's rival, right? Like, they're nobody's big rival. You don't say.
Well, I'd say they're kind of Baylor's.
I don't even think Baylor cares about them that much. I think Baylor cares more about Texas and TCU, right? Two Christian schools battling each other. So I think that's Tech syndrome. They're like, we got to find a rivalry with somebody. So we're just going to start attacking all people. I think that's the problem.
They can have BYU when they come.
At the end of the day, I view K-State as more of a rival than Tech. But I would say, you can say, well, it's more of a friendly rivalry rather than a flat-out hatred. So
I mean, if you guys want to start, you can just shoot a tortilla before kickoff. I'm sure that'll rival them. I'm sure that'll anger them. But they won't like that too much.
Yeah. I will say, obviously, you get three non-cons and then a bye week, and then basically you do not stop playing for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
that's gonna be tough because you gotta be able to run through the entire conference without a break.
Well, and Connor, you mentioned Kansas State as a rivalry. Guys, I've got Kansas State as a sleeper in this conference.
Oh, no, they're the dark horse.
They've got Adrian Martinez. They got, more importantly, good old Colin Klein as offensive coordinator now. That's going to be a smash-mouth team. It's going to have a really good defense and actually sneaky, maybe best in conference offensive line. And then you factor in Martinez's athleticism. And, oh, by the way, the best running back in the conference, Deuce Vaughn. So
a little 5'6" dude.
you might be seeing some old school Kansas State, and any trip that a team has to make Manhattan this year, that win's going to be earned if you get one because it's going to be tough.
That's what I've considered them. If this would be the year for them to sneak their way into the championship game, because I think they're going to easily be in the top half. I think they might be top 4.
Well, they're 8-5 last year, and in that middle part, that top half, like you talked about.
But I think they're gonna. I think they could, if things go right for them, they could easily pull out 10 wins, and try to get in there. But that depends on who they lose to and who's ahead of them. But I could easily see them upsetting some teams right away.
Yeah, and looking at their kind of toughest road home games. At Oklahoma, at Baylor, at West Virginia for K-State. But they do get Texas and Oklahoma State at home.
Yeah.
And so, those are two big matchups. You're glad, like, oh, okay, we get those in Manhattan. For K-State, they're going to have to win probably, 2 of the 3. You can't drop against West Virginia.
No.
And you got to beat either OU or Baylor. That's what you got to do.
Okay, we gotta take a quick break though. My mom has an extremely important question for all of you.
Lord.
She wants to know when Andrew's going to talk.
Hey, it's open mic, man. I'm not trying to
I've
hard.
already said stuff on this.
I guess
talk about the rivalry.
talk more. I can't help you with this. You're trapped in the zone now.
Hey, I don't bite, my guy. I'm good. We're friendly here. Connor knows. That Cade knows. I don't bite.
He doesn't bite.
I play fair.
This isn't a competitive thing, so everything's
Right,
okay.
exactly.
We haven't dissed the Steelers yet either, so we're good.
Oh, don't get me started on Kenny 2 small hands picking. Kenny 2 gloves over there.
Alrighty, but looking at Oklahoma State, I think I know we can talk about their defense all day. It's going to be an insane defense once again. To me, it comes down to Spencer Sanders.
Oh, easily.
It really does.
Oh, yeah.
He's the key. He's the key component.
He is. I mean, if you want to say everyone's a cog on the machine, he might be the biggest cog then in the entire machine, because we've seen when he's on and we've seen when he's off, and it is night and day Oklahoma State wise. You could be winning a game 28-7, or you could be in a game fighting for your life, 10-10 or something like that. It makes the entire difference. I mean, I love this defensive line. You've got people like Colin Oliver who are going to be on that line, make sure they can keep everything controlled up front.
You have Brock Martin. You have Trace Ford coming off his second ACL tear.
Yeah.
It's on both of his legs, but according to players that were in camp, Trace Ford doesn't look like he lost a step.
Well, Sanders' biggest thing is going to be turnovers. He's got to learn how to take care of the ball. He has way too many turnovers throughout the season, and you see it hurt the team constantly. And especially in the beginning part of the schedule, obviously we talked about Baylor's defense. So how is he going to do against in that game off the bye?
Especially it's in Waco, so that's going to be a key thing.
Yeah.
Another key thing.
And obviously usually Texas Tech is usually a shootout, so you see if he's able to go toe to toe with them. And then again, you get in the really really hard part of that schedule.
Well, I will say with Texas Tech, obviously this will also come down to how the defense will be, because last year OSU shut them out, but obviously since we got them at home. I'm not sure how different that will be. It'll either be the same, almost similar to last year, or we do get into a shootout. I do expect Tech. I think we expect Tech to play better than how they did, but that just comes down to how the defense. I'm more concerned about when you look, because OSU I'd say arguably their best group was the linebacking core, because you had Rodriguez and you had number 16. I always forget his name, but
he was there.
Yeah, but basically we had a really solid core of linebackers, but now obviously you have the backups in, and then you lost a couple. You lost McAllister in the secondary, who was a really great safety, but it's going to be hard to see. It's going to be interesting how other aspects of the defense will change. The line's not going to change. It's still going to be dominant as ever. It's still going to be one of the best in the league. It's going to come down to how does that secondary step up after you lost some guys to graduation, and you had a key transfer in McAllister going to Ohio State to still continue with Jim Knowles. So it's going to be interesting to see how that will turn out. And obviously, to test them would be Arizona State, but Baylor's going to be that one game that's going to test them right out the gate off the bye week to see how if they can beat Baylor. If they win in Waco, that's going to set the tone for the rest of the year. But that'll come down to does Sanders play, because if he plays like how he did against Notre Dame, they could easily go beat anybody. But
he's got to start better. I mean, they were lucky to come back in that game. They should have lost that game.
Well, that's good. Well, that also comes down to defense also making that adjustments and stepping up.
Which I think that's your biggest loss of the offseason, to be honest, is Knowles. Like I'm very worried about the defense in that sense.
I think one thing I found out is that defense is still going to be the same, pretty much be the same, just with a Derek Mason taste to it.
Which to me is not the same though. I mean, you're used to Knowles and stuff, and he
but they're not.
the defense.
But they're still calling a lot of the same plays.
I get that, but
the formations are
different
not
voice,
different.
different voice.
Yeah, but from everything I can tell from way they're handling stuff is that they're not. It's all you did was just lose key All-Americans, and you're just having people replace them.
That's not easy,
Yeah,
though,
that's right.
unless you're Alabama or Georgia. Now, to add on to what you guys are saying, though, Like, yeah, Spencer Sanders' time, right? He's got to be that guy that is the commie presence. He's the leader, and for the most part, from what I've seen, Gundy's complimented that he's been that so far through the spring and everything. Offensively, though, as that defense starts to get used to Mason, and as they replace some of those key guys in that secondary you're talking about, Connor, and that linebacker group, they've got to rely on, I think, two big things: the strength of that defensive line. Colin Oliver's of the world, he's got to be that guy, which he was last year.
Oliver,
and they said he's gotten better. Yeah, Brock
Oliver,
Martin,
and Ford coming off the injury.
right? And those guys got to be that for that defense to help calm them a bit. And then offensively, you know, a guy I was kind of surprised they didn't go to more last year, but has continued to work hard. And a guy I got to see in high school and kind of knew, like, okay, this dude's going to be legit. Dominique Richardson, boys. Like, I think he's in for a big year at that running back spot, and that's a guy that could take a lot of pressure off Spencer Sanders, and because he's built his body. He was, I remember in high school, because got to see him play Woodard and just kept up with 5A in general. That was a guy that every time you saw him touch the ball, you said he knows exactly where that play is going, without even seeing it yet. And you watch him in college, and that never left him. And now he's bigger, he's stronger, he's at speed, he's a little bit more shifty. That's a guy that could really pop this year. And if you're going to have success early on, you need to be able to run that ball, let the defense gel, and then hopefully by the time you get to Baylor, you could say, okay, we're kind of where we're at on defense, and we know what we're doing enough to where you get the balance. Maybe you go in there and you pull off that game.
And also you have all the freshman Ollie Gordon coming in,
Yep.
4-star out of Texas.
Yep.
And I'd say, like, just looking at some of his stuff, it's like either he would be the number 1 or 2 guy. Yeah, he's immediately going to start playing. Then obviously you brought in Brendan Presley's little brother, but he'll be a receiver and might be a hybrid running back receiver combination. It's like obviously you don't have. I don't think Brendan Presley will have to probably be that one that go-to guy, but I think it's going to come because they don't. It's like Presley was not that main guy. That was Tay Martin, but now it's like, now who do you look to be that go-to guy for Sanders to throw to and make a catch?
Somebody's got to step up.
So
yeah,
I think it's going to come down to, I think everybody's going to get their chance to get touches, and we'll see from there. You still got those first 3 games. I think OSU would go 3-0 in all those, but that'll come down once again. That'll come down to Sanders.
No, honestly, I'm worried about this year. Like, I think they're an 8, maybe 9 win team this year.
But see, that's the thing with the way the Big 12 is open right now, because other than Texas, on paper, I don't think there's any team that says, hey, this is a top 10 team.
I agree with that.
Right? So it's open. If you get 9 or 10 wins, that may be enough to be the Big 12 champion. Now, it may not get you in the playoff, but we may not have a playoff team this year in the Big 12. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think
so,
Big 12 does.
Big 12. I think the only team that has a shot would be Baylor. Everyone else, that will have to come down to how well everyone plays.
Well, I guess we should move on to the third team to talk about, Oklahoma, who is just kind of here this year. For the first time, it's weird saying it, they're just kind of ready to get started and restart, let the Brent Venables era truly begin. There's not a whole lot to think about, I guess, for Oklahoma, because some of our fan base, I could say as an OU fan, we're more concerned on trolling Lincoln Riley on Twitter. Still do that. It's hilarious. He had a brisket. Look it up. Just look it up. It's horrible. I've been told by many people. I refuse to look at that ugly abomination. But starting with UTEP, I'm excited with it. I know you, Andrew and Connor, have heard me say it. This may not be the best Oklahoma team in history, but this might be one of the most energetic, fun teams that everyone is going to rally around. This entire fan base has been galvanized. Over $109 million have been raised just this year alone, the first time that's ever happened in the University of Oklahoma's history. And it's still going to be a solid team, despite losing nearly everything, it feels like. You lose Caleb Williams. You lose Jaden Hazelwood. You lose one of the best coaches in college football in Lincoln Riley. You lose Alex Grinch, your defensive coordinator. You lose a lot of defensive talent. Your Perrion Winfrey's of the world.
Nick Benito.
Nick Benito. You lose so much, and yet they're still favored to win the Big 12 in some people's eyes. Yeah, that's how crazy it is.
I kind of find that weird because I think there's a lot similar, and even more so in OSU. This team's got to prove a lot quick.
I agree.
Because you don't just bring in all those pieces. People talk about the transfer portal like it's like NCAA football game where you just bring in a guy and boom, he's starting, it works. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of scheme, there's a lot of chemistry you got to build, and I would say similar to how we were talking about with Oklahoma State, having some of those early tests that they've got. You're going to know what this OU team is by the Nebraska game. That's going to teach you a lot about this team. Not to say it'll be their final form, but you're going to know initially, did they ride that wave you're talking about of energy into really a big time off season? Because that's where spring ball weights. That's where champions are really made, and any coach will tell you that.
Just kind of basing on what obviously weighs some of the talent that left, that defense, and kind of also looking at their offense. Dylan Gabriel's going to be kind of like what Sanders, that cog, whether he'll actually break out, have a great season, or he'll struggle, because you don't know, and plus there's really not a really great option after him, so you got to hope one doesn't get hurt or he still plays well.
Sir, do not diss General Booty like that. This is he will win by his name alone.
Hey, Nick Evers was a 4-star, right?
Listen, he's not got a funny name though, Tyler.
That's true.
But I think in regards to their line, I think will be better. Will probably be a little better. I don't really.
It better be better, because it was not good last year. I mean, people talk a lot about the struggles of that team not being able to run the ball. The interior linemen were terrible. They were terrible.
Out of major skill players, isn't Mims really the one big guy that's back?
Mims is the big guy. You get Theo Weiss back from injury, which is a huge help.
He's got a pedigree.
Yeah, he was at times he was Spencer Rattler's number one guy.
Have slot with Stoops.
Yes, you have Drake Stoops, fan favorite. Everyone loves him.
But again, that'll it's kind of what we were thinking. Kind of talking with Oklahoma State, it'll come down to Dylan Gabriel. I know it's a system he's very familiar with because it's literally brought from UCF, but that doesn't mean as much. That doesn't mean as much if he can execute the play calling well. And then the defense, while still was really good, I feel like they're going to take a small step back in key areas, especially I think lineman wise. They just don't seem like they have a guy that's going to force a double team.
Now, don't you disrespect Weatherford's own Ethan Downser.
Weatherford's own.
That man, he may not pop like Colin Oliver, but they didn't get to put him in there a lot last year. But when he played, he was really good, and that man has ballooned up.
I was
Oliver.
referring. You guys, what was his name? It was like big guy, defensive tackle.
Perrion Winfrey.
Yeah, Perrion Winfrey.
Yeah, it's like OU. It's like from everything I've seen with them, they didn't really have anyone like him on that line. So it's going to be tough to say whether they will either be a top three. They'll either be in regards to their defensive line, they'll still be behind Baylor and Oklahoma State.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They're gonna. It's no matter. Are they gonna be that top three? Might push to be one of the best, or they're just that line's gonna be kind of middle of the pack, because it's really hard to say. Secondary, it's really hard to really I don't. It's mainly that line. A lot of the linemen I'm looking at, because they'll be a make or break on how a defense does.
Well, you got to get pass rush in the Big 12, right?
Yeah.
That's nowadays with how offense is. You just got to do that in general.
So
that's where it
really,
starts.
It's really hard. I think the defense I think will still be relatively good. I think they're going to take a slight step back, but that's mainly because they lost players to the draft or portal. Just got to bring people. You just got to eventually build that line up.
Yeah, I'm intrigued here for
the entire defense.
The Nebraska, Kansas State, TCU, Texas stretch. You could go in and lose all 4 of those games. You could go in and win all 4 of those games. It's going to tell you a lot.
Yeah, that's
you saw how close the game was last year at home against Nebraska for a little bit of that game. Tyler, you already mentioned how good Kansas State could be this year. Obviously, anything can happen on the road in the Big 12 and TCU, and then obviously anything can happen in that Texas rivalry. So
and Texas is going to be pissed from last year. They're going to be
the last
pissed.
2 years.
Right, sure. But Quinn Ewers that's a guy that's got to go prove something. We'll get
That's
when we talk to Texas.
Well,
but
it's the thing is 2 years ago, you guys pretty much handled it was a chaotic game, but handled them. Then last year, Texas should have won that game, but obviously Texas going to Texas, and you guys came back and won. They did it the next week with Oklahoma State. So
hey, if Texas don't want to play a full game, they don't deserve to win the game. That's all I got to say.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with
If they want to hand us that game, I'll take it. 100 times out of 100.
60 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
So
boy.
I think obviously when we eventually talk about Texas, we'll just kind of see how they'll be. But this OU team, it's going to be really hard to say how they're going to be. I know the fan base is rallying around this team, but it's going to come down to how especially that stretch from Nebraska Texas how well they do, and you bet. And I'm just gonna pause. If you guys actually lose to Kansas, that's gonna be, or at least play close with them, that's gonna be really bad.
Sir, we've always played close with Kansas in the weirdest ways.
That might be the best 2-10 team in the country this year. You calm down over there.
I think they got 3 wins.
I think
They got one FCS team that I don't know about.
But they got Texas. Tyler, they have Texas.
They do have that's win number 2. I don't know where the third comes.
Duke or someone. I don't know. Anybody.
If we eventually get to them, Kansas at least has a shot to possibly get 4 or 5 games. They might steal a couple. They're at least guaranteed 2 wins, but it's going to be hard to say what they're going to do afterwards.
Here's my thing about Oklahoma. Obviously, I agree with all of you. Nebraska, Kansas State, those are going to be immediate prove-it games. I want to see how well they can run the football. Because, Tyler, I know you mentioned it earlier, the strength of Oklahoma has always been what historically? Playing great defense, running the darn football. You got to be able to do both of those things. Yes, passing helps, and especially.
I don't know about playing great defense has always been the mantra early on in the 2000s.
That's what I mean. The Oklahoma I remember, I guess I should say.
The glory years of
the
Oklahoma.
glory years.
Gotcha.
The VHSs I was shown as a kid.
Yes.
And being told, this guy was pretty cool.
Teddy Lehman, Austin Voss.
Teddy Lehman, Rocky Kalmus, Dusty Dvorak, all those great people. But if Oklahoma can get back to that, if they can get their swagger back, that's something I've seen for a long time OU fans have wanted to see. They want to see them come out there and play like they want to win, not trying to survive for 60 minutes. And if they can establish that, even if they just beat UTEP 56-7 or something, and that's a tall task. I mean, holding any team.
That UTEP team's bad. I look.
Holding any team. Here's the thing, though. Holding any team to 7 points for 60 minutes is a little hard. Anything can happen in a game. Sure. But if they can come out and just deliver a few kill shots early in the year, everyone will be fully behind this team, and that Nebraska game will prove so much. Texas, you can say that's a prove-it game, but no one ever knows what's going to happen in that game. Literally, a meteor could crash down and hit the Cotton Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised to go, yep, OU Texas. Never know. Anything could happen in that game. Literally anything could happen. We've seen it all, but I am so excited for this Oklahoma football team. Don't know how good they're going to be. They could be anywhere between 8 to 10 wins, maybe even 11, maybe even 12 if everything goes right. That 2000 team didn't deserve to go undefeated at times, but hey, they did.
A win's a win, so.
Yeah, win is a win is a win.
I'd say I'd give this, for this team, the way their schedule is, I'd say they'd probably win 9 games.
Yeah, and they got to do that.
Well, in regards to the expectations, since they lost so much, it's like if I was an OU fan, I wouldn't place any form of heavy expectations on them because it's like all they need to, if they get 9 wins, I'd call that a win because you're going in the right direction with the team. But then again, it's like I'm just hoping Oklahoma State can at least pull out 10 wins.
I think they're over-unders around 8.5, 9.5, I think.
Yeah, we got Cade mentioned DraftKings pulled some of the over-unders, at least for the Big 12. Now, this was 2 weeks ago. No, this was a month ago. Excuse me. And they had them at 9.5, which was the highest in the conference. They only had Baylor at 7.5, which kind of puzzled me. But
well, the whole thing with Baylor is they don't return a whole lot.
Yeah. But nobody does.
But no one does
really, other than Texas.
No, well, that's why I think, like you said, 9 wins could win you the conference.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, I think, talking about expectations, and Tyler, you'll know this as well as I am. We're Oklahoma. We don't have the best intentions on being, normal at times. I've already talked to OU fans. It's like, we're going 11-1. We're going back to the playoffs. Yeah. Brent Venables is here. If we don't win the Big 12 title, this season's a failure.
Dylan Gabriel's winning the Heisman.
That's every fan base.
I mean, every fan base has those, but I think I think that also talks about how well Brent Venables has done in galvanizing this fan base, bringing them back to where they need to be. The 75K at the spring game.
I hate to bring this up, but this is like, actually, no, I don't. But it's like it's one of these things that OU fans were so happy when he got let go, especially because he was so heavily criticized especially because the Big 12 was going into that spread offense that made the Big 12's defenses look really bad a lot of the time. So everyone was constantly blaming Venables for like how bad things were going. It's like, okay, it's like everyone in the Big 12 is struggling against this type of offense. So it's like its problem is not cutting him slack. And then when he finally left, they brought Mike. Everyone was celebrating, and then everyone realized, bringing Mike back was a mistake. And then now, but I just find it hilarious how OU fans are now praising Venables as the second coming when he literally pretty much got ran off.
Well, and I think there's a reason for that. So I've got kind of more of a personal story here. So my dad, construction worker, welder now. Back in the day, he worked on OU Stadium when they were expanding things. That first initial expansion of the 2000s, early 2000s. And he actually ran into Brent Venables, all right, one of these days, just kind of working.
Yeah.
And he straight up was like, that guy was a prick back then. I mean, just legitimately. He was kind of one of those that would big time you, kind of,
Yeah.
hey, if you weren't somebody that he was interested in, whatever, get out of my way. And I really think that kind of, unfortunately, is as sharp of his mind as he is. Back then, at least, he was young enough it kind of leaked into things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why more of that, like you're talking about, people were glad he was gone because it's just, you got to have somebody that you could lead you. And then he goes and hooks up with Dabo and Clemson. I think Dabo really, the best thing Dabo did for him is taught him how to approach life. Not coaching, taught him how to approach life. And I think you could see the difference now in how he, just as a man, has come around, And so I think that's why you get some of that. And that, I mean, I'm sure there's just, Mike Stoops is horrible, right? So there's that bar in itself. But, I think legitimately you could see that this is different for Brett, and I think he realizes part of the reason he's got the fan base so galvanized is that he realizes the opportunity at hand here for what he could really do, with the resources that he's got.
Exactly. But we need to talk about another team that has resources, Tyler,
Delaware.
that doesn't always know how to use them. They have them, but, man, sometimes they don't know how to use them. That is,
They can recruit, but they don't know how to develop players.
they got a man known as 7-Win Sark running their team right now. That's all you need to know. It's the Texas Longhorns.
Hey, it was better than 4-1 Herman, baby. That's
They lost to Kansas, though. That was a legendary performance.
that's just tradition at this point.
Yeah, what are they, Texas A&M? They did it twice. It's tradition now. But Louisiana Monroe is the first game, the Longhorn Network game. And then big noon kickoff against Alabama. That is going to be, if you want any test, just go ahead and get the biggest test of the year. How good is Texas? How good is Quinn Ewers? How good is this team going to be? You've got them at home right where you want them. And then the week after, I know they get fan favorite UTSA, the Roadrunners.
That's a 12-win team from last year.
That is.
It's like you got to play after Bama.
It's like UTSA is not a slouch. They're a solid unit. I know they probably could have. They just didn't drop some of their final games. They would have went undefeated, but they dropped one late. Then they played. Was it Marshall who they played, or was I thinking of somebody else?
Yeah, somebody else.
Okay.
That Sunbelt was.
They got beat by
really
North
tough.
Texas or something like
And
that.
They dropped that one, which they shouldn't have, and then ultimately they just it kind of derailed them a bit.
Yeah, but it's like they're still gonna be a good team. So it's gonna be one of that. Is that a game Texas will have to rebound off of when playing Alabama? Because we'll find out how Texas is when they play the Tide. Because they'll beat Monroe, maybe. I say that because you never know with Texas.
Yeah.
Because they've only had one good season, and that within almost their entire stretch since Mac Brown retired. So you never know. Is it going to be the same old Texas we've had for almost a decade at this point, or are we going to get a Texas team that actually will bring it and might try to play for a Big 12 championship?
And then you get some road tripping, getting to go up to Lubbock for a game that one team will tell you is a giant game and one team will tell you is no big deal. And then you come back home, you get West Virginia, OU in the Cotton Bowl, Iowa State at home the week after that, then a trip up to Stillwater, bye week, go to Kansas State, come home, play TCU, go to Kansas, and then Baylor at home. That Kansas game, folks, I mean, I know we joke about
It's
it.
on the road. I
it's
listen
on-
to one of their
I
tough
know-
ones because it's
I-
on the road.
That's the thing, Tyler. Not only is it on the road, it's right before Baylor, too. They gave them a trap game, basically, with Kansas this year. I mean, my goodness, just evil scheduling on part of the Big 12. They know they're leaving, so they want to make it painful. They want to see them lose to Kansas again. But this Texas team is talented across the board. There's no other way to say it. You look at some of their offensive weapons. Quinn Ewers has yet to be determined how good he'll be, but they have Bijan Robinson at running back. They have Xavier Worthy at wide receiver. You've got Overshown as one of your best defensive players. They're going to have talent. It's just, can they use it properly? And that's been the Texas question for the past, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 years now? Not 100. They did have Vince Young that one time.
On paper, it feels like pretty much every year, because obviously they usually always have one of the best recruiting classes every single year. On paper, they should always try to be competing for a conference title or a playoff spot. Instead, what have they been doing? Constantly been laying around 500 or not even make a bowl game. It's like as much all of us in the room love to see that, it is kind of from a football fan perspective, it's kind of like, what are you doing kind of thing if you just look at it away from our team's perspectives just as a football fan. It's like it's agonizing on the brain of just how poorly this team has played ever since Mac Brown retired.
Yeah, so I think a big one here, obviously the Red River rivalry here, but I'm going to take that game a different approach. You expect them to obviously should beat Texas Tech, and they should beat West Virginia at home. If they're able to find a way to beat Oklahoma, you're looking at most likely 4-0 going into that Stillwater game, and then that's a 50-50 game. You could possibly going in, I'm talking about conference, 5-0 going into that bye week. Now, if you lose that Oklahoma game and then you lose in Stillwater, now you're going 3-2. So that swing game there could be that Oklahoma, and especially just momentum-wise, confidence-wise. So obviously, rivalry set aside, I think that's a big game for them in terms of where does their season go from there. Because obviously, at Stillwater is going to be tough, so if they drop that game, you'd hope they can get that one. That way they can stay atop the Big 12, especially with Baylor finishing out the year.
Yep. Yeah, and, to add to what you guys saying about team on paper in terms of what they got, you guys, if you're out there watching, you're not familiar with Quinn Ewers, this is legitimately, by at least high school pedigree, the best quarterback they've had since Vince Young. Mm-hmm. This guy was not just the number one in his class. He's one of the highest rated QBs we've seen in the last 20 years. I mean, he's that good. And he's going to have Bijan Robinson, who is arguably top 5, top 7 running back in the country. He's going to be right there at Deuce Vaughn's best back in the conference. Then you're going to have Xavier Worthy. That guy, to me, pound for pound, is the best receiver in the conference. He's only a sophomore. He was a true freshman last year. And, I mean, God, if he stays healthy, he can only get better. The big thing is, though, here's some quick stats for you. This team last year gave up 6 yards per play, 31 points a game, and let up more than 200 rushing yards a game. They have got to figure something out on that defense. I mean, that's ugly. That's, as Jim Ross would say, bowling shoe ugly. That is terrible. And I don't think Kansas had that bad numbers in terms of the yards, per play and rushing. I mean, if you can't do that, I don't care if you've got Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, Lynn Swann on that other side of the ball. It ain't going to matter because you can't stop anybody. And the good thing for them, we talk about the Bama game, that's going to be an early test. I don't think they're going to be favored. They're not going to be probably within, a touchdown maybe of a favorite there. They might be if they're lucky since it's at home. But the beautiful thing for them, if they drop that, like you were saying, all of a sudden, okay, and like you said as well, Connor, you pick yourself up a little bit with UTSA, who's a solid team. You go get it an early but easier to win road game in the Big 12 and Texas Tech. And then you have those stretch of home games, and all of a sudden you get the confidence back.
Not to cut you off right there. It's like, but if that Tech game is at night, that's going to probably – it's like because of the weird spooky magic in Lubbock. That's going to be – because Texas doesn't have a great time at playing nighttime against Tech. So
no one does.
So you got to hope that's a day – you got to hope that's more of a day game. If it's in the day, it's like, oh, okay, Texas probably – if it's a night game, I'm expecting an upset or something to happen. But – on paper, yes, they should beat Tech, with no issues, give or take.
Yeah, well, I do want to add real quickly. I believe the last time Texas went to Lubbock, it was that game where it was 56-41 Texas Tech with 2.5 minutes to go.
Right.
And Sam Elliott leads a great comeback, ties the game at 56, and Texas had to score 60 points to win that game in overtime. I mean, that's just classic Big 12. I don't think either defense will be that horrendous this year. I would at least hope not for their fans' sake.
I think
but my goodness, that could be a fun one.
For Texas, their defense should be a little better. I don't expect them to be – I expect them to kind of be around middle of the conference in regards to their defense versus versus Baylor, Oklahoma State. I would say OU and it's really hard to say who would be in front of Texas. I just don't expect Texas – I expect Texas to be 5 or 6. In the conference in regards to their defense.
That's not going to be good enough, though.
I
Their
know it's not going to be good enough.
is
I'm just saying that's where my expectations are for them because it felt like sometimes they were probably one of the bottom half. I expect them to just be barely in the top half of the conference. But I expect that offense for Texas to be better That's probably the only great thing I can say about them. Just that defense is just it's really bad at times. Like you said, bringing up all those numbers, they were not very good last year. They should have been better, but they weren't. But
what's their over-under, like 7.5, 8?
They've got 8.5 listed.
Yeah.
So that's right there with Oklahoma State, and then right there with OU. Those are top 3 in the conference. I'm still surprised, like I said, that they got Baylor at 7.5. But,
Baylor
that's
should be like 9 or 10.
basically by the odds makers, if you will, or the experts out there. They're, like you said, Cade, some got OU, some have Texas because of the talent on paper. Some people still believe in Oklahoma State to kind of be the leader there, despite all they've lost defensively, just because of, like we talked about offensively, how they're going to be even more consistent.
I will say, kind of watching Oklahoma State, they had very good backups that I think will do a good job trying to replace what we've lost. My main concern is probably that linebacking group, but the secondary, not as worried as I usually have always been, because for years it was like, can we get a secondary that can work that wasn't just our best corner? Because we'd always have a really good corner. It was just everywhere else was always bad, it felt like.
But you did lose your 2 top DBs to graduation.
Yeah, I know.
Just reminded.
Yeah, it's like not hearing me say about that. It's like I'm expecting them to be able to take a step. I don't think they'll lead the conference like they did last year. I think they'll be 2 or 3. But it's like I expect them to not really miss a step in certain aspects, while they'll probably be downgraded on their linebacking core because they either graduated or they did graduate and then went pro. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, moving on to the next team here, we've already talked quite a bit about Kansas State, mentioning them as a sleeper team. I think all 4 of us are in agreement on that fact there. The combination of Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn combined with Colin Klein as an offensive coordinator and always a solid defense. That's just how Kansas State is. They're always going to be physical as well. You look at their first 3 games, South Dakota, Missouri, and Tulane. First of all, Tulane, that game, that's just a little bit of interesting game there to see what Willie Fritz will throw at him. Just more of a schematic thing. I also say that as an OU fan, wanting to see that game be close.
Best 4-7 team in the country.
First
Tulane.
of all,
Watch out.
I just got to say about Tulane, because we're probably not going to talk about them any other time except right now. Best logo in college sports, Angry Wave.
Oh, no, okay.
That's all I got to say. It's the greatest logo. I have that helmet in my room. It is a great logo. When they wear the teal jerseys in light blue, it's perfect. Perfect. But I had to get I have to get my Tulane support out there. I do enjoy some green wave, roll wave.
But
that's all I can say. But looking back at Kansas State, the big test obviously for them going to be the trip to Norman, coming back home, getting Texas Tech, and then good old Farmageddon against Iowa State. You get a bye week. That's a real name. They both call it that.
Yep.
You go to TCU. Oklahoma State is homecoming, and then Texas, and then Baylor. So there's a big 3-game stretch right there for K-State to prove themselves, if they haven't already by then. And then a trip to West Virginia, and then the Sunflower Showdown with Kansas to end the year in Manhattan.
I'd say they probably should be like with both OU and K-State go 3-0 into that first Big 12 matchup, and that will be the test to see how K-State will be able to do in a hostile environment. Because I know OU is going to be ready for them, because last time K-State went to Norman, they choked away a game they should have won against K-State, and obviously, but you're playing against a much better team than you played the last couple years. So it's going to be a huge test for OU playing a really good K-State team that, like we've been saying, is probably the dark horse of the conference to possibly make a trip to a championship game. Then obviously Tech, it's like, and Iowa State will also be a big one because it's not fun to play in Ames no matter what time of day it is. Then obviously you get the bye week, and then obviously like we were saying, right after that TCU game, you get the 3-game stretch with Oklahoma State, Texas, and Baylor, and you get 2 of those games, those first 2 at home, and then you got to go on the road to Waco, and that's going to be a big test for them to see how they'll be at. This team could easily somehow could get 10 games if everything goes right for them, or they could go 8 like last year, win 8 games. Just a matter of how well does this team do overall.
Are they going in with a quarterback battle, or are they set? I know they got the the young recruit coming in, but they also have obviously, I think it's a junior coming back.
Right, and the expectation, at least from camp so far, has been that Adrian Martinez is the guy. That being said, as we know, college football, if we saw with Spencer Rattler, anything could happen. If he comes out throwing ducks, they're going to say, all right, let's get somebody else in there.
I don't know. It's Colin Klein might say we're running the ball 20 times with our quarterback.
I think that's what we're envisioning here with him as OC.
It's going to be a heavy run quarterback offense, like how they did with Lockett last year. That when they're able to run that formation of where, okay, is the quarterback going to run it, or is the running back going to get it, or who? Because almost anyone on that team can run the ball.
Yeah,
that's just how they've always been, regardless of whether it being under Bill Snyder or their current head coach.
Yeah,
well, offensive line's so good too.
Yeah,
I think they had 4 or 5 players on the projected All Big 12 first team. I think 2 of them were from the line.
Well, and what's crazy about that, to your point there, is that they only returned 1 starter. That Cooper Beebe kid, who is nasty. If you haven't checked him out, that kid's going to be probably – it wouldn't surprise me if he winds up being a first-round pick. I don't know if he'll get there because this is a big year, but he's your lead guy at the most important spot. And so even if you don't have, 4 guys that necessarily are returning starters, some of those guys you mentioned, I forget the name of the other dude, they rotated him out pretty well and got enough experience. I think they'll be fine there. But
I expect the utilization of Martinez in the run game a lot. So he can take. One thing is his issue was his throwing ability at Nebraska, and that also came down to him having to run for his life half the time, ended up throwing some turnovers. But with the way K-State way they're functioning, he doesn't have to throw it. You can literally just run. You can run with him most of that game, and he can take punishment. So, but
Lord knows he needed to in Nebraska.
But it's like he's someone who can easily take who can take punishment and not cough up the ball a lot, actually very little. So it was mainly. But I think if that run game is utilized very, very well, teams are just not going to be prepared for a pass play. It's going to be hard to kind of defend, especially if it's a run first team, and their formations. You don't know if they're going to throw it or pass it. Pass it or run it. God, I'm getting my words mixed up.
It's okay. It's late.
So what are we thinking? 7 or 8 wins here?
I'm expecting about 9.
9? I think I'm going 7.
I think they're going to be better than that.
The problem they have is when you look at this schedule is, one, enormous stuff. That Baylor game is not going to be a cakewalk. Texas, as we mentioned on paper, going to be really good. You do get some breaks. You get, Texas, Oklahoma State at home. And then, you talk about that Iowa State game. To be honest, here's a hot take for you guys. I think Iowa State, other than Kansas, will be the worst team in the Big 12. They lost so much offensively. You lose one of the best running backs in the country. You lose your receivers. And, whatever you want to say about Brock Purdy, he was at least consistent for him at quarterback. And I don't think they've got enough forces to do anything. I just don't see Matt Campbell having a above 500 Iowa State team. So I don't fear Ames as much this year just because of that.
Reason why I still throw the Ames thing out there is that they're still tough to play at home when you're playing at their place. I think when they go on the road, they're not going to be that difficult to deal with. But it's more just some bad luck has always happened with teams in Ames. But then again, obviously, we'll just see how they'll actually play. I do agree. I think they'll be one of the worst teams in the conference. Either they'll barely be 500 or they won't even make a bowl game.
Well, I do think Campbell's got a lot to go for there. I think him being one of the more valued coaches, I think he can steal a game or two just with his game plans. Yeah. So I do get that they lost a lot, but I do like his coaching. I think he's a good enough coach to keep them around 500. And especially in any home game in Ames, I think he's capable of winning.
But for me personally, I've got Kansas State as a 9-win team. I like what they do this year. I think they're going to beat Texas at home. I believe in my heart of hearts, Kansas State, they do the same thing with Oklahoma they do with Texas. They get up for those big games. It really would not surprise me if they took one from Oklahoma or Oklahoma State as well. But I think you look at it, they're going to start getting some serious looks once they get to that Oklahoma State game late in the year. That game is going to be such a big game to me. That game right there, that might be a top 15 game by the time we look at it.
It could be. Game day going to Manhattan.
Game day at the Castle.
If they go into that game
they'll
with
be-
one loss,
That's what I was.
You
I was
know.
looking at their schedule. Like, the only team they would likely lose to would be Oklahoma.
right? They won't
If
be
they-
favored yet.
But if they beat Oklahoma, they're going to that 7-0. But I
so.
think
Yeah.
they'll likely go into the Oklahoma State game 6-1.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, Texas Tech at home, I don't fear that. At Iowa State this year, I don't fear that. That's a rivalry game Iowa State can never figure out how to win. That's just the fact of it. Iowa State's getting better at Farmageddon, but they haven't been able to get there yet.
So what better way to win than the year not supposed to?
Well, yeah, that's what you would think. But Iowa State has found so many times, just like Iowa, they find a way to win and then don't do it. They find the way to win purposefully. It feels like don't win that game. They get so close. But I really want to see how well this Kansas State team does this year. I think they have the potential, like we've all agreed, to be that dark horse. It wouldn't surprise me if they beat Oklahoma State at home. It wouldn't surprise me if they go on the road and beat Oklahoma. The only team I don't think they can beat straight up is Baylor. And that's just with that being in Waco at home. Maybe they could pull something off there.
And Baylor just overall is tough, top to bottom.
Yes.
They're probably one of the most out of Case, like between K-State and Baylor. Baylor is probably on the same level of physicality.
Yes.
And I think with the talent with Baylor versus K-State, Baylor has better talent.
Yeah. But let's take a trip, now that we've talked about the top half of the Big 12, to get to the middle of the pack, I guess you could say, starting with TCU as I close out of this ad here. Thank you very much, FBSschedules.com. Looking at TCU's schedule, Bill Connolly's Strength and Power rankings have TCU as the 6th best team in the Big 12, and they get that immediate test we talked about. Friday night in Boulder, going up into the elevation. I know people love to talk about that. We'll find out how good TCU is pretty quickly into the season, a day before most of the Big 12. Then you come home, you get Tarleton State, you get a bye week.
What a tough bye.
And then, like Andrew, you said with the tough bye, and then the battle for the Iron Skillet, the Metroplex War with SMU, and then Oklahoma at home at Kansas. Look out for that game, TCU at Kansas. TCU struggles with Kansas at times, folks. That's a game to keep an eye on. If you're a Kansas fan, if you're a TCU fan, lover of occasionally bad football, that's a game to look at right there. Oklahoma State, Kansas State at home. Those are good games to have at home if you're TCU this year. Trip to West Virginia, Texas Tech at home there, and then going to Texas, going to Baylor, ending the year with Iowa State at home. One quick note about that Texas Tech game. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but TCU is trying to prevent Texas Tech fans from going to that game. They've said they're going to do everything in their ability to not get Texas Tech fans to go, because Texas Tech, they saw what they did to Texas last year in basketball, and they think it'll happen in football this year. So Texas Tech fans who live in the Metroplex are planning to take over Amon G. Carter Stadium. Look for that game just for a spectacle on November 5th. If you want to see something crazy like that game in Austin in basketball last year, where you get the pan shot, you see 45% of the crowd in black and red for a Texas home game, that might happen this year for TCU.
I don't doubt that. TCU is just, they're kind of just in that stretch where they're just like they're just not as good as they used to be when during the heyday of Gary Patterson, and obviously just near the end of his tenure, the last couple seasons just haven't really gone well, and now it's a new era.
It is a new era. It's the Sonny Dykes era.
So, and Sonny Dykes did a great job. He was at SMU, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he did a fantastic job helping revive that SMU program. We'll see how that will turn out. I think I was just kind of while you were talking, I was kind of running down teams they would more than likely beat. They could go. I think they're going to go 6-6. Like, they're going to beat teams that they should be, and then they'll probably drop the 6 games during conference play. They'll go 3-6 in conference play. Awkward silence.
I don't want to jump on.
I just saw that look where you're both like, okay, speak.
But no, so the problem for them, they lost Zach Evans, 5-star recruit at running back. Pretty much sat out all of last year, transferred now to Ole Miss. They don't know who their quarterback is. Max Duggan has started before, but he hadn't blown people away. Chandler Morris has an opportunity. The one shining light they got is Quentin Johnston, who's landed on a lot of preseason watch list at receiver. If that guy could, find some chemistry with one of those two quarterbacks, great. But, those first 3 games, those are not conference games other than Tarleton State. I don't think Colorado's going to be that good. But you're in bowl, you're on the road. To open a season, that's not easy. And SMU might actually, be right there in the American again to challenge. So that's not going to be a gimme for the Iron Skillet.
No.
And, other than that, really, I look at the schedule and I say, okay, Kansas is a conference play you can get. But you got to go to West Virginia. We'll touch on Texas Tech, but I've got some thoughts on them why that might not be an easy game. And then you get Iowa State at home, so, they might win. I'm giving them 5. Giving them 5.
Depending on how things go, if the inconsistency keeps happening at quarterback, they would probably only maybe win 4 games. I gave them the 6 because I basically counted all their non-con, and then they would grab 3 wins in conference play. Like Kansas would be a win. I did Tech because Tech is just weird like that, and then I picked Iowa State for them to win those games.
Well, here's the thing with SMU, with that being their former head coach, you don't think those players want to beat their former head coach?
Well, and I think SMU will be favored in that game.
They probably will.
Talent.
I wouldn't be surprised whoever wins that game, but I would give the edge to SMU at home going up against you. You might have the straight up better team.
They should. I just went ahead and did that just to be whatever. Just say, oh, they'll make a bowl game, but I think they'll be lucky if they get 5 games. I'll probably just change that right now. They'll go 5-7.
I mean, I would be shocked to see them start. What would that be, like 2-6 after the Kansas State game, with the wins being Tarleton and Kansas?
Yeah, I might give them Colorado.
I'll give them Colorado.
That's a toss-up.
Well, I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised to see.
Oh
it.
yeah,
It's a toss-up.
Yeah,
I mean, if you can't win that game, you're looking at 2-6.
If they lose to Colorado, they might just go lose to Kansas.
Oh yeah.
And you figure you still got at Texas and at Baylor, so there's 2 more losses. So that's 2-8. Probably get West Virginia, so we'll say 3-8, and then Tech's a toss-up, and maybe Iowa State. So yeah, depending on what that Colorado game is, I'll go 4 or 5.
That's probably what they're gonna be.
What's their over/under before?
They've got them at 6.5, so they got them a little higher. They think they could reach bowl eligibility, but maybe not by much.
I mean, they can, because last year, because they were not playing very good, they were the only team besides Oklahoma State that beat TCU. Not TCU. They beat
TCU
Baylor.
did beat themselves quite a bit, though.
They were 5-7, so yes.
They beat Baylor. Just out of Morris just had a fantastic game, and then obviously he'll probably do the same thing. Like people were thinking he could do something against Oklahoma State, and then Oklahoma State just clapped him. So
yeah, to Connor's point, if they do go 3-0 in conference, obviously expect them to take Kansas. That'd be win number 4. Iowa State, we already talked about, there's 5, and then they just got to get 1 more to get there to 6 out of any of those other ones.
Tech would probably be the only one that'd be able to get 1 out of. Otherwise, they're not gonna be bowl eligible.
I could see them maybe pulling something off at West Virginia, but it'd still be an uphill battle.
West Virginia's going to be a weird team because I know they have JT Daniels, but we'll get to them.
Kansas State too could be a trap game for Kansas State because I believe that's who it was when we were going through their schedule. I think Kansas State has a bye and then they go to TCU.
Yes.
That could be a trap game there for Kansas State.
Mm-hmm.
It very well could, but I've agreed with you guys. I think it's going to be TCU gets about 5 wins this year. It's going to be about similar to last year. They got to fix that defense, man.
Oh, it's horrendous.
That defense is horrendous.
So
I looked at it. It is the worst defense in the Big 12 by a mile.
We talked about
same
Texas
with Kansas and Texas.
200 yards rushing.
Yeah.
TCU let up 222 yards a game.
TCU had a.
I mean, when your defenses are doing worse than Kansas, that says a lot.
I mean, TCU at times did not have a defensive line on the field. They actually had turnstiles on the field, it felt like. There were some teams that could just run right by them. I mean, Kansas gave them a hard time. Everyone gave them a hard time.
28 plays of 40-plus yards allowed.
Yes, it was
28.
Absolutely brutal for TCU. And we talked about one first-year head coach in the Big 12. Why not jump to another? Texas Tech, Joey McGuire is the man in charge, and his first game is against Murray State on a Saturday night in Lubbock. One of the most haunted places to play in America, in my opinion. Texas Tech, Iowa State, NC State, Iowa, just the state of Iowa in general, that Corn gives them superpowers out there. There are a lot of spooky places at night, I guess is the best way to say it. And they'll get to invite Houston out there. They get a game at NC State. Texas coming to town, going to Kansas State, and then going to Oklahoma State. They have a 5-game stretch where they might play 5 top 25 capable teams in a row to start the year after that one nice game against Murray State. You get a bye, get West Virginia and Baylor at home before going to TCU, getting Kansas back at home, going to Ames, and ending the year with Oklahoma. Joey McGuire's already said, they talked about it, we're going to beat OU and then we're going to break the stadium. Why are they going to break the stadium? Because they're getting renovations this year.
Exactly, yeah. Might as well break it, huh?
But I'd say just for their non-con, they would likely might go 1 and they're more likely to go 1 and 2.
More than likely.
Houston, they're a very good team. They're a good team, and and we're the second best team in the American behind Cincinnati. But it's just really hard to. I'm not sure how Houston will be because sometimes they'll be amazing, and then
we got stats pulled up.
I'll get to it.
Okay,
go ahead. Don't worry. You're
then but they're not gonna. But I'll say they'll probably play a close one with Houston since they'll be in Lubbock, but they're not gonna win against NC State. That's like, unless NC State does what sometimes they have done when they're supposed to be really good, or good for the ACC standards, they choke a game for no reason.
I can't say what the word is on the show, but I'll shorten it to NC State stuff. There's a certain word they say there, but I can't say that on.
But they're more likely to go 1 and 2, and especially after Murray State, I know eventually K-State will get in the top 25, but that's all top 25 teams right there. And they're likely to play close with some, if they're in Lubbock, but once you go away from Lubbock, they're probably going to lose by a good amount. I just don't see them. They could still win from Texas, but I just don't, on paper, I just don't see it happening, even though Tech is going to be taking steps forward, especially they apparently had a top recruiting class I know it's going to be for 23, but they're already in the discussion for having a top 5 class. But they're getting in the right direction. But for this year, I think they'll play tough for a lot of teams. But it's really hard to say. I want to give them 6 games, but it's really hard to point to who they actually are going to beat because they would have to steal a game in non-con to possibly get 6.
I'm always intrigued to see a team with a new coach, and now you add this front half of the schedule to it with a new coach. So I'm very intrigued to see how they respond to a new scheme, how they respond to a new coach, especially if things go south quick. What's he going to do to keep this team together, or at least attempt to keep it together? Because, I mean, that stretch after Murray State is brutal, and then even coming off the bye, you mentioned, okay, well, you probably survive West Virginia, but then you get Baylor at home. That's probably a loss, and at TCU is going to be tough going on the road. And then you end with Oklahoma. So this could only be maybe like a 3-4 win team if things go south quick.
Yeah, they've got them projected for 5.5 over under.
That's fair.
So, basically saying they're kind of on the edge of most likely missing some bowl eligibility.
I was like, I'm not going to be pointing at the screen, but it's going to be like they'll obviously get the Murray State win.
You hope.
You hope. Yeah.
I would like to think I'd say they would get that, but
it's Tech. Remember, they struggled with Houston Baptist.
That's true.
Then again, Houston Baptist is Bailey Zappi, but
they could take one from West Virginia since they'll be at home. They'll beat TCU. They'll get one on Kansas and then Iowa State. That's like 4 or 5 wins.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of their schedule, they're going to be lucky if they can play close with some teams. There's others that they'll play close with, but others probably not so much.
So that coaching staff that we're talking about there a second ago, it's funny you mentioned Bailey Zappi. So Joey McGuire, who's a longtime Texas high school coach, very successful. One of the things, I get to do, one of the privileges, I guess, working at the radio station and getting our kind of tri-state area coverage, we get to talk to a lot of those West Texas high school coaches. And, guys, I tell you what, I have not heard a bad thing about Joey McGuire. Then you go listen to his Big 12 Media Day, that guy gets it. Now, Texas doesn't have the talent to be competitive this year, I think, in a lot of scenarios like we're talking about. Yeah. But you mentioned a second ago with the recruiting class, that's all Joey McGuire, because that man, you go listen to him, that team in 3 to 4 years, it would not surprise me if Texas Tech is, even by next year, not this season upcoming, but the year after, they might be knocking down top 25 ranking because that guy he motivates people. And then on top of that, you mentioned Bailey Zappi, right?
Yes.
He had an offensive coordinator Zach Kittley, who was regarded as kind of one of the new, how Lincoln Riley was at East Carolina,
Yes.
where, hey, this guy's the next big thing in terms of offense. Zabby threw for 62 touchdowns at Western Kentucky last year under Kittley and, literally 5,000 yards. I mean, put up stats, and guess who McGuire went higher?
He went after him.
Kittley. So that offense, I think, might return back to some Mike Leach high-flying type of days.
They'll get
And,
back to
could
the
be fun.
identity we all grew up
Yeah.
with.
But I think with that, especially with eventually with the new teams coming in, that's going to be, you're already setting the tone that, hey, we have some of these teams are getting better that typically haven't been doing as well prior. But because I know Kansas is trying to get on the up, because I know they're finally going to have juniors playing instead of basically just being freshmen and sophomores. But Tech is going to be, like we said, they're probably going to be 4 or 5 wins this year unless they steal games out of nowhere. But I do believe, I agree with your point, Tyler, is that they're going to be better in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I think they're going to try to compete for a Big 12 title if they can continue to get better.
One thing I do want to mention, in case we don't get to them, I've got Houston winning the American Conference, by the way, and maybe being a dark horse to take that Cincinnati spot as, hey, this team's undefeated. They need a shot.
Yeah.
Got a lot of talent coming back. That might be an ugly, ugly game after a big win against Murray State.
It
for
might be.
Texas Tech.
Holgerson has done an amazing job getting Houston back to where
Turn
they
them
should
around
be.
quick,
Yes.
real quick.
Just
Clayton
like
Tune,
that.
Quarterback, watch out.
I like how he was he was going to eventually be on the down with West Virginia, and he obviously left at the right time. But going to Houston, and he just immediately okay, we're good again. It's that's amazing how.
To be fair, you get all the resources of being in a big metropolitan area like
Yes.
that. I mean, we saw the same thing with Tom Herman. You can build a program out there really quickly if you have the right commitment and buy-in.
Just the thing is just winning. That's
That's
been
a
his
pretty
problem.
big one.
He could do it at Houston, he just couldn't do it at Texas.
Yeah. But looking at Texas Tech, I personally see a 5-7 season in store for them. It wouldn't shock me if they played a few close ones, especially at home. Maybe give Texas a run for their money. Maybe give Houston a run for their money. But I just cannot find any big games that I could see them as this is the game that turns their season around or changes anything for them.
Well, it's for all I know, they could take, I know I didn't mention them because I didn't think it was going to happen, but they could take one from OU.
They could.
They could, but will it happen? I don't think so, but that depends just on circumstances surrounding that final game because we're going to be near the start of the season. By the time we get to the end, it's going to be entirely different.
If OU loses to Texas Tech, Brent Venables is not that guy. I'm sorry, because that should be a gimme. Texas Tech is, even as much as OU has lost on paper, that matchup's not good.
Here's the thing, though, Tyler, and you and I both know this. Lubbock is a weird place.
Sure.
Things that happen, it's about like going to the Twilight Zone. You go in there, and things that should happen don't.
But
you go meet a guy named Pat Mahomes, he breaks all sorts of records. Guys bounce into the end zone for touchdowns. Alan Bowman becomes the greatest quarterback of all time for one half. Everything weird happens in Lubbock. And if it's a night game there, it does not matter. Anything can happen.
while I agree with that assessment, if that game was earlier in the season,
Yes.
then we got a case because we say, well, maybe OU's not quite gelled yet. But that is literally the last game for Texas Tech. If OU hadn't figured it out by then, something was going horribly
That
wrong.
is true.
And then, but obviously, I know it's this whole thing is what we think what will happen, but obviously from here to now to then, things could be entirely different. We don't know how things will work out. We just got to hope for the best for any of our situations.
Yes.
So you guys keep talking about the games that might steal. I think the opposite. I don't think they're talented enough this year to steal those type of games. I think they're in jeopardy of losing a game to Iowa State. I think Iowa State can steal a game from them because of that Matt Campbell and such there, coaching wise. So I think Texas Tech, while I think they're still a year or two away, this is a year they kind of lose, kind of like Nebraska last year. They lose those close games rather than steal.
Then you look up and you're 3-9 and you go, what happened, man? That's just how it goes.
Yeah. Hey, we were close in that one game, then that's about all you can say.
All right.
But moving on to the next team I have here, and sure enough, that is Iowa State. We just talked about them. The Cyclones taking on Southeast Missouri in game number 1 before getting right into the Cyhawk game with Iowa, coming home playing Ohio and getting right into it with Baylor. Then you take a trip to Kansas, come home, get Kansas State, then go to Texas. Big bye week, and then getting Oklahoma at home, West Virginia at home for homecoming. A little weird to have the second game of 2 be homecoming, but hey, you do you, not judging. Going to Oklahoma State next, and then coming home, Texas Tech Senior Day, and finishing the year at TCU to close out that regular season. Iowa State's a team that you look at them, they've got Xavier Hutchinson, a great wide receiver, but that's really it when you look at Iowa State offensively. I mean, congrats to Jared Russ. He's the fullback of the year in the Big 12, at least preseason first-team fullback. And, I mean, Iowa State would be the team to use a fullback, knowing Matt Campbell's style. He's about like what we think of Coach Kleiman at Kansas State, physical guy, going to play good defense, offense. You never can really figure it out. Brock Purdy was consistently inconsistent, as I would put it. But we'll see what they can do, because seeing Sam Deckers in person last year for a little bit when Iowa State came to Norman, he just does not look like that guy. He just does not.
The bar is not high compared to Brock Purdy.
That was their best quarterback outside of Seneca Wallace for like 1 year. But the bar is not high, and I don't know if he can get across that bar.
I think they're going to be an interesting team. Obviously, they lost a lot. Again, I know I mentioned it a couple times now, but I believe, especially college football coaches, have a lot to do with it. I still think this team's capable of winning about 6 games.
Andrew, I'll give you, you're talking about Matt Campbell and his coaching ability, and I agree with you in the sense that if you have, we just talked about Joe McGuire, if you got a guy that gets it and can develop some talent, which Campbell has a track record of, you can overcome a lot of deficiencies, if you will. We saw Luke Fickell do it with Cincinnati.
Yes.
I mean, he turned a group of guys none of those guys were 4 or 5-star recruits. They were all 3-star, maybe they were transfer, and he turned them into not only legitimately, I think, by the season end, a top 4 team in the country, deservedly. 9 of the defensive players on that team got drafted in the NFL draft. Like, that's incredible. You only see Bama or Georgia do that, or Clemson, right? So, but the problem for, I think, Iowa State is that defense is not going to be the strength it has been in the past. And then you factor in, you lose so much offensively. I think that's the big concern for me personally, because they'll have a good front. They've got Will McDonald the fourth. That guy is going to be prime-time defensive end, but they lost a lot of secondary help, and then you lose that running attack with Breece Hall. Like, how do you replace that production?
No, and I get that. I just think we kind of touched on it already too. I think it's going to be such a down year for the Big 12 where everybody's just going to beat each other up, and we mentioned that the winner could get 9, possibly 10 games there. So if that's the truth, and you kind of have Oklahoma State, and say Texas there, that 8 to 10 range, you're going to have a bunch of teams farther down too. So I think it's just going to be mad chaos in the Big 12.
Might be a good year for Iowa State to rebuild, is what you're saying.
Kind of just looking at the schedule, especially with how they're going to be down on offense and defensively, I'm going to give them 4 wins. I just don't think they'll lose against Iowa, and then they'll beat the Redhawks. I don't know how they'll be against Ohio. I mean, it's not a big bar right there. But
Ohio's not good, trust me.
Yeah, I know they're not good, but it's mainly just how is Iowa State going to be?
They should just be happy they're not playing Northern Iowa. That's all I can say.
Or Central Michigan.
Or Central Michigan.
They probably could beat Kansas and then beat TCU, but other than that, I can't see them winning any other games on the schedule. They're just. I mean, unless Matt Campbell's coaching ability can take them to a win, then you maybe could see them getting 5 to 6. But I just don't see it happening, especially just how much talent they lost.
So how off am I? What's their over under?
6.5. And a reminder, they
getting
went
there.
7-6 last year.
Yeah.
Just
greatest team of all
last year.
time and went 7-6.
Yeah.
One of the greatest teams in Iowa State history.
Right. That's why I'm kind of like, you look back and you go, oh wait, they only went 7-6 and they lost all this. Oh, but like Andrew said, hey, it is a down year in the Big 12, so maybe that's the right time to say, you know what, we may not be great, but we can at least get back to the bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at Iowa State, I'm thinking, maybe 4, maybe 5. I could see a disastrous year where, something happens. Maybe they only win 3. That could very well happen.
Boy, Matt Campbell's stock.
I mean, yeah, his stock
Should
would
have
go
taken an
down.
NFL job last year.
Yeah.
And
Should have taken that Michigan job 2 years ago.
and
Mike
Mike
Denise Schroeder.
and Mike and Perkins said Iowa State's going to go 5-7.
He did. He believes in a 5-7 Iowa State
Where you
team.
said 5-7?
5-7.
Mike and Perkins saying Iowa State will go 5-7. That very well could happen.
That's probably probably going to be their best that you can probably get out of that team.
I mean, unless they pull some voodoo or something and beat, someone crazy at home, beat K-State at home or something like that.
Yeah, they would have to pull off that.
Well, you get
upset.
Southeast Missouri, you get Ohio, you get Kansas. Again, I already said it. I think they steal Texas Tech.
They might, yeah. I mean, it's at home, so
Yeah.
why not?
So
In West Virginia, it really depends on talk about
That depends
Jimbo
on the time
Rival.
of day. That's
Man.
that's one of those you just kind of flip a coin.
if that.
well, that's my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no team in the Big 12 really. You're sitting here saying, okay, they're gonna blow them out. Like really, outside the teams we already talked about in the front of the show.
But moving on to, we're almost at the end of the Big 12, and then we'll kind of start flying with some of these other conferences here. But starting with West Virginia, they've got the earliest start out of anybody, starting with that game against Pitt right out of the gate. And then you come home, you get Kansas, you get Towson, you bring back the Black Diamond Trophy game at Virginia Tech this year on a Thursday night in Blacksburg. We know how crazy that environment can get. Then the trip to DKR, bye week, Thursday night game at home. 3 Thursday night games for West Virginia this year. Get one at home against Baylor, then go to Texas Tech, come back for homecoming against TCU, go to Iowa State, then Oklahoma and Kansas State at home before going to Oklahoma State. Difficult 3-game stretch to end the year for the Mountaineers. But they do have a national champion in JT Daniels at quarterback, a guy who knows how to win. Even if he was watching it from the bench, he knows the coaching, he knows the everything. He's got championship experience. But can that translate to wins on the field? And on the defensive side, you still got Dante Stills. You still got one of the Stills brothers to be able to anchor that defense. But it's looking like it might be a tough year once again for Neil Brown and the Mountaineers.
Yeah, I think it can transfer though. I think it takes a lot of value being able to sit back, take a year or two, develop underneath a good system, see that championship mentality. So I think that can go a long way. I mean, is it going to help him to carry over some of the other holes on the team? Maybe not, but just him personally, I think it could go a long way and have him have a successful year from a JT Daniels standpoint.
Well, on a little trivia for you, who'd they hire as offensive coordinator, Phils? Anybody know this year?
You got me.
Texas Tech legend Graham
Yeah,
Harrell.
Graham Harrell.
Followed JT Daniels. They were together at USC back in 2019. So if there's any saving grace for West Virginia, it's kind of similar to Oklahoma in the sense with Lebby and Dylan Gabriel, is that you got two guys that know each other, really trust each other. And, Cade, you mentioned that defense going to have, probably arguably one of the top players in the Big 12 on it with Stills. If they can mend around him a bit, and then all of a sudden JT Daniels says, hey, by the way, here's what I did, back at USC, here's my pedigree, and they put it together, anything could happen, especially if you get some of these, clutch. You get Baylor at home, you get Oklahoma at home, and Kansas State. I mean, those are all big breaks in your schedule. It's just, man, you're non-con. This is a team that's been really good in the non-conference over the last few years. They've just struggled in Big 12 play. Now all of a sudden you got at Virginia Tech, at Pittsburgh. Those are not gibbies by any stretch.
This, probably besides you can make the case for Texas, they easily have the hardest non-con out of everybody because you got to play Pitt, who's still going to be pretty good, and then you got a Virginia Tech team that's going to be we're playing at Virginia Tech. That's already tough enough.
Texas has Bama.
I'm just saying,
What's harder, Virginia Tech and Pitt, or Bama?
I'm talking about amount of teams. It's like Texas only has one major game, then the other game, unless you don't count UTSA, is a possibly tough game to come off.
I count them, dang it. 12-win teams.
Meet.
But it's like versus other teams in the Big 12, they have the second hardest schedule. So it's like, because obviously Alabama's already going to put Texas on top because you're playing the best team, or easily the best team in college football. So you're going to have, that's something that's giving Texas a major with that. But Pitt's going to be a tough one, especially your big games are all on the road. Then your other non-con is luckily at home, but it's against a FCS team. So that's where, and with the Townsend Tigers. So with them, kind of looking at, I'd say probably about 6-7 wins for them. because I'm basing it on how they taking count of last year and then kind of somewhat what I think will this year. JT Daniels will definitely be a step up in regards to your offense.
Oh, absolutely.
With how good, especially how good he was at Georgia, and then I was one of those that were like, why is he not playing when he was healthy enough to come back in? Instead, no, Kirby Smart kept trying to ride with Bennett. It worked out.
We kept trying. They got
out.
the title, kid.
No, I'm saying.
Well, to be fair, every Georgia fan said that. JT Daniels might have been the greatest quarterback to not actually see the field for all we know.
Everybody always loves the backup, though.
That's true. Everyone loves their backups, but
It's
Connor does have a point.
Like I was about to say before you threw that at me, it was like they ended up winning a championship with Bennett because they just got hot. They got hot at the right time and beat a really good Alabama team.
It helps having the number 1 defense in college football,
and
too.
maybe in college football history. You're going to look back and say, oh, my God, that defense was insane.
Yeah, it's insane. But even though Daniels should have came back to start right away, and they actually, in my opinion, they would have went undefeated. Daniels actually played. That's how much I thought he was better than Bennett, but it worked out.
Yeah. So Georgia take that one loss with a natty, though. I mean, who wouldn't?
I'm like, it's like it worked out for them, so I can't really say much on that. But yeah, they'll get. I could actually see them winning their first 4 games. Then obviously you got Texas to deal with, and that's in Austin. Though they've won in Austin before, so it's not necessarily. But we'll see how that turns out. Yeah, they could probably get 7, might steal an 8 game out of that, but depends on who they upset. It'll be one of the games they'll have in Morgantown.
See, I see it as the opposite. I look at this West Virginia team, I'm thinking a 5-win team. I think they lose to Pitt. I think they lose at Virginia Tech. I look at it. I think they're those games.
No.
Lane Stadium on a Thursday night. That is a crazy place. They've been wanting that rivalry back for a while. Heinz Field is going to be sold out for that game. I think Keaton Slovis can show out in that game. You look at what Pitt has been able to do offensively, even though, yes, they lose a lot. They lose Kenny Pickett. They lose Jordan Addison.
If Slovis has bigger hands than Pickett, it'll be okay.
Yeah, that is true. And does he wear 2 gloves? We got to find out. Many questions will be revealed September 1st.
By the way, over under 5.5 wins. So,
all right.
I'm gonna go 4-8.
You're going to go 4-8.
You guys are really underselling them.
Yeah.
I mean, outside JT Daniels and still,
that's my thing. They got JT Daniels. Yeah. Who's going to throw 2 though?
Yeah, I mean, you got to have somebody out there.
They might sneak a win or 2 or maybe even 3 on someone you don't expect them to catch up on. But I don't think they beat OSU. I don't think they beat K-State. I don't think they beat OU. I don't think they beat Baylor or Texas, Virginia Tech, Pitt. I mean, then you win some nice conference games. You get 5.
That's where I'm like, it's like I'm sorry, I'm not big on Pitt, and Virginia Tech is very weird.
That is true.
So,
but that weirdness plays into Thursday night, though.
Yeah, that weirdness, and it's like they. So, I would say arguably the team you had last year with West Virginia was worse than the team you're going to have this year. So, and they didn't even. But they only won like 4 or 5 games last year.
West Virginia, we had 6 and 7.
And I think they were worse last year. I would say overall they were not.
Defense was better, that's for sure. Their defense was actually a strong point for once.
Yeah.
It's like that's where I'm on the lines of that. I think they can get 6 to 7 again, and they're going. I think they'll beat Pitt, and I think they'll beat Virginia Tech.
Yeah. That's what's gonna come down to. What do they do in the non-conference games? And I don't think they take both. Whether which one they take. If they take one at all, I don't think they'll be taking, because both of them are also on the road. So I think that's tough for them as well.
Connor, if they beat Pitt and Virginia Tech, I'm going to the gas station, buying a scratch off, and you're scratching it for me. Because that ain't happening, kid. I'm sorry. It's not happening. I see for this team,
I'm sorry, I don't
3 wins. Give me 3 wins for West Virginia.
Wow. So we finally got one where we're all over the place. Now we got to change it because Bold Take Kansas win the national title, folks. That's happening. You heard it here first. They're going to win it in basketball. Not saying they'll do it in football. They will win a national title in something. Unless you're that one guy who picked Vandy to win the SEC, he might pick Kansas to win the national title. But looking at the Jayhawks wrapping up the Big 12, Tennessee Tech to start the year, at West Virginia, at Houston, Duke at home, Iowa State, TCU at home. You got a nice 3-game home stretch there if you're the Jayhawks. And then you go to Oklahoma, you go to Baylor, you get a bye week, Oklahoma State at home, go to Texas at home, and then go to Kansas State. Now, I know as a lover of memes, I will be circling that Kansas-Texas game.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Just for the jokes. And I know Kansas, I believe, Tyler, if I'm correct here, which I'm usually not when it comes to these over and under win totals, is Kansas at 2.5?
That they are.
Okay, I remember that for one
There you
reason.
go.
If I was a gambling man, which I'm not because I would lose all my money in 5 seconds, give me over. I think
Oh.
Kansas can at least get 3.
But, okay, so they beat Tennessee Tech, obviously.
Beat Tennessee Tech.
But
They
who do you
beat
beat after
Duke
that?
at home, and they get one of TCU, Iowa State, or Texas.
Oh,
One of
Texas.
those 3.
they get Texas.
They get Texas. Teddy Lehman said it too. He said, "Give me 3 because they'll beat Tennessee Tech, they'll beat Texas. They got to win one more." I agree with Teddy on that.
Where's my thing? If Tyler, you picked West Virginia have 3 wins. That means Kansas is capable of beating West Virginia. That's 1 game difference.
That is true. The difference is there. I counted one of West Virginia's wins as Kansas.
No,
There
I'm
you
just
go.
saying, like,
Yeah,
if it's
yeah.
a 1 game fluctuation.
Oh,
then
yeah, no.
you-
West
you
Virginia
pick
could be the
anything
worst. To me, West Virginia
So-
might wind up on the bottom of the conference if things break wrong.
Yeah.
So, like, really, like, again, with how bad the bottom of the Big 12 is here, they
Yeah.
could beat each other up.
That is the long shot bet you've heard from me.
I'd say give them 4 wins.
All righty. Well, I have been one-upped.
So who do they beat then? Who's your forward you got?
Tennessee Tech, Duke, Iowa State, TCU.
Interesting.
There you go.
So that means
If Kansas goes 4 and
I was about to
2
say, that
going
means
into
they're 4
Norman,
and 2 going into Norman.
but game day alert.
Wait, when was the last time they had a 2-game win streak?
I don't know. That we do
Oh,
not
so
have.
like 09 or 08 or
Wait,
09.
actually, no. That's a 3-game. Wait, did you say Duke too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a 3-game win streak.
That might be
I'm
the
I'm
first.
putting
Time.
way too much faith in.
I mean, that
that's-
might be the first
that-
time since 08.
That's me putting too much faith. But if I was,
Actually, no, 09.
the thing is, it's like those are the teams I think they're very capable of beating. But if
Yeah.
I said, oh, they're going to beat Texas, that would give them 5, and I don't want to give them 5. So I'd have to take away one of those wins to give.
Screw
put
it,
on
they'll beat
Texas.
Baylor. Give them 6.
So
Kansas is
It's
going
like, I
12
don't-
and 0.
it's
This is
like-
how it happens.
Oklahoma State off the bye week. prepared clearly off the bye.
Listen, they're going to come in and hold the ball for 55 minutes and beat Texas Tech too.
Mike and Perkins said 2. They'll
He
get
said 2
wins.
and 10. Mike, you got to be a believer. You got to be a believer in Kansas football.
No, but going
If-
back to that, I think the over under 2.5. I think 3 is just a fun play. They're just hoping they take. one.
Yes.
Oh yeah, because you.
So I think that is absolutely the play. If you're thinking
That is my 100% legit gambling strategy. If I could gamble and it's me, so I would lose instantly.
Well,
But
I'll tell you right now, Duke is rebuilding, so I could absolutely
Yeah.
see them
Yeah.
at home being a favorite there, and then Tennessee Tech should be a given. And then, like you're saying, like you guys are saying, you just take one conference game, which they won last year. You're 3. There you go. There's your over. So
yeah,
I still think about 2 games. Oh, they'll beat Houston,
yeah.
Okay.
There goes your sleeping team.
Oh man, that's why you got to give respect to Kansas. They bring out the joy in everybody. They
Well,
absolutely do.
It's like this is like the one sport where we get to
the one
enjoy
sport,
them
yeah,
before we start hating them.
It's the one sport we all actively root for Kansas in, and then it comes to basketball. It's like, please no, just no.
Yeah,
It's time to stop.
Get away with everything.
that's all the Big 12 right there.
Yeah, well, that wraps up the Big 12, and I thought we would go maybe 30 to 45 minutes on the Big 12. We're sitting here, an hour and 40 minutes later.
Just talking about Oklahoma, OSU, and Texas took up a large portion of our time.
Yeah, well, I mean, and then Kansas
Then
here.
K-State.
Yeah, but now we get to enter. I was gonna do speed round on like the ACC and Pac-12 and stuff because they're kind of some wonkier conferences. But we're about to speed run everybody now. We're close to it. I know, Tyler, you're giving me the look of Cade. What the heck are you doing?
Hey, I'm down I'm ready. I'm
All
always
right.
prepared. You know me.
Well,
so.
I do know you. This is what happens. This is what happens when you work with people. You learn how they are. I enjoyed you talking about, as I try to find this here, you talked about, watching Dominic Richardson. I listened to him, board hopping your game.
Oh, that's right. I forget about that.
Yeah,
You're bored
I
off
was
of
there for that one time.
You heard my discuss every time he'd make one juke and he's gone for 70 yards. You're like, oh, good Lord.
But I guess the team to start with in the SEC, the defending national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. The main question for them, obviously, can they do it again? It's a difficult role. It's a difficult role to play as the defending national champions. We all know.
It mainly it'll depend on how many guys on defense are they bringing back after they lost a lot.
Well, they bring this guy back. Don't know if you ever heard of him. His name's Jalen Carter. He's very large human being. You know, anytime you get a defensive line, you can put it fullback just to mess with teams. That's always a good sign. Georgia starting the year against Oregon. Fun matchup, obviously. Dan Lanning, defensive coordinator at Georgia, now at Oregon. Kickoff at a neutral site of Atlanta, Georgia, before taking on Samford at home in Athens. Fun fact, Samford put 52 points on Florida last year.
Yes.
I don't think they'll do that to Georgia, but if they do, people are going to lose their mind.
End of the world.
Speaking of offenses, going to Williams-Brice, Spencer Rattler will be lurking around.
And Austin Stogner.
And Austin Stogner. Can they put a few points on the board, keep that game competitive with the Dogs? That game is always a notoriously weird one early in the year. 11 a.m., it's going to be hot in that stadium. That place is – it makes it feel 30 degrees hotter, I've been told. You get Kent State at home, go to Missouri, Auburn at home, big game there, one of the best rivalries in the SEC. Vanderbilt at home for homecoming. Who doesn't love a good beatdown for homecoming? Bye week, off to Jacksonville to play the Gators. Tennessee then comes between the hedges, a battle of the Bulldogs in Starkville, going to Kentucky as well, and coming home with some good old peach fun against Georgia Tech.
I think you could argue that they're tough.
Also, Mike has informed us he's going to bed, so have a good sleep,
There
Mike.
you go. Good night.
I think you could argue that the toughest game on their schedule is the first game of the season. That's
Yeah.
why I believe
This is the same thing as last year.
That's why I believe this team can definitely repeat. Like, obviously, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I know Kentucky will be a good test, especially on the road. And I know Auburn's always decent, at least. And
Tennessee
Florida's
will
always
also
a
be
tough
pretty
team,
good.
But I truly believe that Oregon might be the toughest team on the schedule.
Now, I agree with that. Don't forget, Bo Nix is at Oregon. Good old Auburn legend Bo Nix. Maybe hunting for some revenge there, if you will.
You mean Oregon legend Bo Nix.
Not quite yet. He's got to do a little bit to get over Dennis
Off-season
Dixon,
legend Bo Nix.
But as far as in-conference goes, I think your two biggest challenges, simply because they are road games. You mentioned that South Carolina game, Cade. Don't forget, guys, we're talking not 2 years ago or 3 years ago when Ryan Helinski was a freshman there.
Yeah.
The starter there got a concussion. Helinski comes in. It's a 10-3 ball game at half, and South Carolina pulled off that upset against a Georgia team that was ranked, top 5 in the nation at the time.
Yeah.
So that is a weird one. And then Mississippi State for me is kind of an underdog, like in terms of the sleeper side of things. I think Coach Leach, this might be his big year for Mississippi State. That one might not be as easy. Thankfully for Georgia, I think you kind of duck a little bit of a potential bullet by getting Tennessee at home. That would have been a tough environment.
Yeah, it's like if they played at
Rocky Top, that'd
Rocky
be
Top,
tough. And Tennessee, honestly, guys, they might be a good little team. I don't think they're going to be deep enough to compete with your Bamas or your Georgias, but that might be a 8-9 win SEC team.
Yeah, they for the most part were pretty solid last year. Just they came up short in some games they probably should have won. Ole Miss would probably be one of those, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. But
That's how the mustard bottle flies.
I can't believe they also did it again in baseball.
Yes, it's great.
That's great. But I think Georgia will go undefeated with the way their schedule is. They'll probably play Alabama again.
So are we all in agreement on that, or because we kind of got the awkward silence going right now?
I mean,
I thought you were taking no. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I think Oregon's their toughest game. I think they're going to beat Oregon, and I think they have a very good chance of going undefeated in the SEC championship game.
the only thing I'll add really here is, you talk about the defense that's lost. Georgia now, at least by recruiting class and what they were able to do by getting over Bama finally, Kirby Smart has basically, I guarantee you, telling his guys, hey, we got to be Bama in the sense that there's no rebuilding, we are reloading.
Yeah.
Those guys next man up got to be ready, and that's, if you're going to be competing with Bama, that's what you got to do.
I think out of all teams in regards to like whether rebuilding or reloading, they're reloading. I think
They've got to be, yeah.
I think they'll still be like top 3 defense in the country, but either they'll take a slight step down or they'll just be the same as they were last year. I don't expect them to take any major drops. I think they'll still dominate like usual. Maybe they'll probably give up a few more points than they typically would have, but they're going to be – I just don't see anyone taking one from them unless they just have a really, really bad day.
Well, defense from last year, I better be ready for the NFL. Eagles got two of the defenders. They better be ready for the NFL.
Yeah, they better be. But moving on to Tennessee, ranked second in the SEC East if you go by strength and power rankings, which I'm a believer in. They're usually pretty good. I enjoy looking at them. Tennessee gets the year started with Ball State on a Thursday night before they go to Pittsburgh. That's a shootout alert right there.
Mm-hmm.
Two high-powered offenses. Should be a fun one there. Before coming back home to get the Zips of Akron and then getting Florida at home. So 3 or first 4 at home, always a good way to get started. Bye week, going to LSU, getting Alabama at home, getting UT Martin at home, getting your FCS game a bit later in the year. Kentucky at home, going to Georgia, come back home, get Mizzou, and then in the year at South Carolina and at Vanderbilt. So Tennessee looking to keep that high-flying offense going. They have Hendon Hooker back. They have Cedric Tillman, a great wide receiver. Expect a lot of Hooker to Tillman this year. Going to be a fun time there. They love to go fast, and that's what I love seeing, how the SEC has evolved over time. 10 years ago, there were a lot of games that looked like Big Ten games. I'm not going to lie. There were a lot of, 17-10 type of games. But now you look at Tennessee last year, their bowl game with Purdue, it's 52-45. Right. Look at some of these games. They're flying all around, and that's what Josh Heupel wants to do with the Vols.
Well, it's mainly the offenses are more like how the Big 12 was, where the high flying, a lot of more pass happy than they typically were. Like a decade prior, it was mainly run first, Big 10 style. Unless you're Alabama, then you basically just blow everybody out by a lot of points. But
they can do whatever.
But a lot of the time, a lot of the SEC was just mainly just basically play like power football. Now it's high flying, how the Big 12, and then it's like it's like Alabama and Georgia, great defenses, but I love it how they're like to make fun of the Big 12 for not having defense. Like, you guys give up like around this like 30 plus a game at times. So it's like, I don't want to hear about how the Big 12 doesn't have defense anymore when the Big 12 has been doing a better job of keeping offenses on there from really doing anything a lot of the time. But that's just my little side rant on that. But Tennessee, they'd probably get 8-9 wins overall. Like, they could probably get 10. Who knows? It depends just how well consistently they play.
Yeah, their key stretch is going to be right after the bye. Obviously, UT Martin you can throw out the window, but I could see them losing every game to LSU, Alabama, Kentucky, Georgia.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going to make or break. I'm intrigued, and I'm jumping the gun here, but I'm intrigued to see LSU this year under Brian Kelly. So I'm really curious how that game will go, and I think that could be a big test there for Tennessee right out of the bye week.
I hate to disagree with you a lot, Andrew, but just my personal notes, we'll get to it. I have LSU as my biggest disappointment in the SEC.
Well, I'm intrigued to see how they are. I'm not saying they're going to be great. I'm more intrigued to see how that game goes.
Yes.
Right.
And especially at LSU, I could see them.
I'm ready to see Brian Kelly try to continue his Cajun accent.
Yeah, all as a family.
Yeah, as a family.
But anybody want to tell me who led the SEC in 40-yard plus plays last season? Tennessee, baby. Yeah. 23 Hendon Hooker, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
With that receiving group, that's going to be what they do. And part of the reason is we know Heupel, as a play caller, that's what he wants. They don't have the best defense, and that's where they're probably the thinnest. They kind of covered it up well last year. They still won 8 games despite, having a defense that gave up 33 a game in SEC play because they averaged 39.
There you go.
So if they can improve that side of the ball at all, I think this might be, a 9-win team where they finish second, and probably their best hope is that they lose just to Bama and Georgia, right? If you could take out everybody else, the rest of that schedule ain't too bad. I mean, Pitt is a tough non-conference game. We've talked about Pitt a bit, but, Vandy's not really a tough road game. South Carolina, that one could be interesting late. Missouri's not good. I think, personally, Kentucky fell off a little bit, so that one might be easier, and you get them at home. So, yeah, I mean, that could be a 9-win Tennessee team.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll be a little bit more optimistic with the Vols. I've got them as a 10-win team.
Oh.
I think they beat everybody except Alabama and Georgia. I think they will come into third Saturday in October undefeated. I think they can pull it off. I really do. With their offense, the way it's built, Florida's kind of rebuilding.
They are.
LSU's rebuilding. They can beat Pitt. Pitt's not as good as they were last year. Still be a challenge. You beat Ball State. You beat Akron. You're 5-0 going into that Alabama game. I think they lose that one pretty easily. But Kentucky being at home, I think they win that game. I think it'll be a shootout. At South Carolina will be a shootout, I think. But those both games, I will give the edge to the Vols.
10-win Vols.
Yeah, that's what I believe, and I'm sticking to it
It's
until
like-
they lose to, Akron for some reason.
It's like
31.
I'm doing 9 because I think Kentucky can. Well, Kentucky might be slightly down. I think Kentucky can still win.
Yeah, they easily could beat.
So that's why I'm the 9 because they'll beat everybody else on the schedule except for Bama and Georgia. Kentucky is kind of the game where I can be on a coin toss.
For me, that game is at South Carolina. By that point in the season, even if South Carolina hasn't been fantastic, they might have some stuff figured out.
That's true.
I think that's a dangerous game.
It is.
That's probably their trap game.
Especially if they are going in that game with only 2 losses, and you go to the road there, who knows what's gonna happen. And you're going right before Vandy, so if you're able to win that South Carolina game, you're thinking, okay, conference championship, and you drop that game at South Carolina.
Yeah, it's a big oof. But moving on to the next team, I know we talked about them a little bit already. They've appeared in 2 schedules. Florida, the Billy Napier era is underway, and it started with not the best thing in the world. Have some recruiting issues, or at least perceived recruiting issues. Florida fans are already up in arms saying we made a mistake. Maybe we shouldn't have fired Dan Mullen, except we needed to. Oh, my goodness, what do we do? Well, he's turned it around on the recruiting end. Can he turn the Gators around in the terms of wins and losses? And, boy, he's got a challenge right out the gate. Utah at home, first game of the year in the Swamp, and then you get Kentucky right after that. And then South Florida is your easier game, but you never know. Some of those games, we saw what they did against Florida Atlantic before. We've seen some of these wackier games. Like I mentioned, Samford last year. You never know, and that's the crazy thing. Then you go to Tennessee, Eastern Washington, one of the FCS's finest, comes to the Swamp. Unfortunately, they're not playing that up in Cheney. If you
I
want
want to see it on the red
yeah,
field.
I want to see it on the Inferno. I want to see that red field. I want to see so many people complain about that on ESPN. But Missouri at home for homecoming. LSU, always a fun rivalry game there. Bye week, getting Georgia for the world's largest cocktail party. Going to Texas A&M, that one's going to be a crazy game. And then South Carolina at home before going to Vandy and ending the year at Florida State on a Friday night on ABC. First time that has happened. So, what do we think?
So Billy Napier led a really good program down there at Louisiana Lafayette.
Yes.
You mentioned some of the early struggles. I think he's starting to connect with that team. And, they bring talent. Surprisingly, Anthony Richardson, that quarterback they got, he is, if you go look at the mocks right now, he's going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in this class coming out. Now, where does he fall in the country? I don't know, but they've generally, Florida, finds guys that can play ball, right, whether they're high recruits or not. It makes it better when they get the high recruits, but I think this team ultimately challenges some teams. I just don't know if they get to, above 7 wins. That might be their ceiling for me at least. They might be a fun team, take some of those games to where it's like, oh, hey, this game at A&M could be interesting, But I just don't think they have quite the talent to get over that hump.
They could start 1-3.
They could. They very well could.
Or,
Yeah.
sorry. 1-3.
No, 1-3, yeah, because,
No.
Utah is going to – they brought back a lot. Utah, that's going to be a loss. I'm
Utah,
telling you now.
Yeah. They could. I know last year they had a wild game with Kentucky, but who knows how that since Kentucky's actually competing now. So who knows with that one? But they should get one on UCF. I don't see them beating the Vols in Rocky Top, and then just kind of look. I think they only win 6 maybe win 6 games.
I was about to say, I think I go 5.
It's like it was either 5 or 6. It was just like I just don't think they have the talent to help them get to that 7 wins. They'll probably drop some games. They'll lose 7. They'll at least lose 7 at the most.
The over-under's what?
Their over-under is 7.
I'll take
So
the under on that.
It's right there at that kind of mark we're talking about where they're going to make the bowl game by a little bit or they're just going to be under.
I got to go with 6 as well. I like Anthony Richardson. I think he's a great quarterback, but he cannot carry, 21 other guys, offense and defense. It's going to be a rough year for the Gators. I think they get lucky to make a bowl game. I think they do. They get right at 6-6 in the regular season. But my goodness, one wrong move and it's Not a great start to the Napier era.
Nope.
But one final team two final teams we're going to look at in the East because we've already talked about how Missouri and Vandy are not worth talking about. Kentucky is another interesting team in that they were a 10-win team last year, and they could very easily do it again. They still have Will Levis. They still have Chris Rodriguez Jr., and they start with Miami of Ohio, going to Florida, Youngstown State, and Northern Illinois. They could get through that September pretty well, setting them up at a giant game at the Grove with Ole Miss, come home, get South Carolina, get Mississippi State, bye week, go to Tennessee, go to Mizzou, and then Vandy, Georgia, and Louisville at home. So no real, super giant tough stretches in Kentucky's schedule. You do have a softer start, I would say, with Miami, Youngstown State, Northern Illinois. But it'll be interesting to see what the Wildcats can do this year.
I'd probably say, looking at their schedule, they probably get 8 or 9 wins. They probably don't. They don't beat Georgia. They don't beat Tennessee. They more likely, I'm going to say they don't beat Tennessee. They probably might drop that homecoming game against Mississippi State, and I think they pretty much beat everybody else on the schedule.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to go 9, maybe 10 if they can steal the game at Tennessee.
I think that Ole Miss game will be a key one if they can win.
See, I think they drop Ole Miss, but I think they win every other game before the bye.
For Georgia.
Here's something funny.
Yeah.
Actually, Miami and Northern Illinois might be the MAC favorites this year. That being said, I'm not about to say that they'll beat Kentucky. The over-under is 8, so just to let you all know that.
Yeah.
Man, I think Ole Miss is a loss, honestly. I think they lose to South Carolina. And going to Florida makes a big difference for me. They might be, to me, 4-3 going into that bye. I mean, they beat Miami, beat Youngstown, beat NIU, and then maybe Mississippi State. I think they could have those 4 wins. They could be 3-4 before the bye to me. So I don't know if I'm quite as high on them. They had some playmakers last year that they lost, both sides of the ball, and they're not deep. That's the problem. That's been kind of their issue. When they've got a few playmakers, they're good, but you got to be deep in the SEC, guys. You got to have depth, and I just don't think they have it.
I've got Kentucky as a 9-win team personally. I know, Tyler, you mentioned the depth, but if you think about it, Florida, that's earlier in the year. That can easily be an issue. Let me rephrase myself before I get going. That can easily be an issue, but I don't think it would be a problem yet. I think they can beat Florida. Ole Miss, I'm going to chalk up as a loss. I do not think they can win that game in Oxford. South Carolina, I feel like, is going to be one of those weird ones where it is going to be close, it is going to be fun, but at the end of the day, one wrong move happens for the Gamecocks, and Kentucky survives being at home. I think they lose at Tennessee and they lose to Georgia, but beat everybody else. Also, Dakota checking in, saying, good to see you, Tyler. So
he tried to call me. I was like, hold on, man. I'm on there. You're going to have to.
Yeah. There's only one other person I could see with Dak Wagon as their Twitch
legendary Dak Wagon.
Yeah, the legendary Dak Wagon. So we've got a 9-win Kentucky team in my prediction, but one final team to talk about that, Tyler, I know you've mentioned a few times already, and that is South Carolina. There's a lot to love with Shane Beamer's team. You got Spencer Rattler, the OU transfer. You got Austin Stogner, the tight end. This is going to be a weird South Carolina team. They put together a really good team every year, but there's one fatal flaw. They're in the SEC. They always have a great team, but they have so many good teams they have to play, and they're also in the state of South Carolina, so they play Clemson at the end of the year. You look at their schedule. They start with Georgia State, immediately go to Arkansas, get Georgia at home, then Charlotte, South Carolina State, go to Kentucky, bye week, Texas A&M at home, then Missouri, Vanderbilt, go to Florida, Tennessee at home, and then go to Clemson to end the year. So a brutal schedule as always for South Carolina, but if they can win a good chunk of those games, you're talking a great season, top 15, maybe even top 10 if you win enough.
They'll be looking kind of just on paper, looking at their schedule. They'll be lucky they go 5-7. They do not. I don't, unless they steal one against Arkansas, which would put them at 6. I don't see them beating. I'm just going to go. I don't see them beating Arkansas, Georgia, They lose at Kentucky. They lose to A&M. Because I just don't trust. Since the Rattler's their quarterback, I don't trust them. And they don't beat Florida. They don't beat Tennessee. They don't beat Clemson. I'm assuming I chose 7 games. I probably didn't, but I just don't see them winning any of their so-called bigger games.
So I'm going to disagree. I am a big believer in the change of scenery. I do think that plays a big factor. I think Spencer Rattler, obviously things went downhill at OU, but I think him getting a fresh start here is going to be big for him. I think South Carolina is a good fit. I'm going to say they get 7 wins.
That's 7 to me, though. That means you got to beat Florida. You essentially got to beat Florida or Kentucky. One of those 2 teams where you upset.
We just talked about Florida might get 5 wins, maybe 6.
Right,
Yeah.
So it's a competitive game. It's a winnable game. And I was going to say, I'm sitting at like 6 wins just because the schedule is tough. I mean, you got Arkansas, Georgia on there, Clemson. You mentioned Cade, Tennessee. I mean, those teams right there, and then you got A&M. So those are 5 legit losses. That doesn't leave you much wiggle room after that is the problem. So I would say 6 wins is kind of right there, and if you get to 7, that's probably really fantastic because although they did add Spencer Rattler, Austin Sogner, some other big-time transfer talent from smaller schools, again, it's the same issue I have with them as Kentucky. They're not deep. Their depth chart is not very deep right now, and that's something that I think will get better with Shane Bieber. But remember, guys, they had less talent last year. They still won 7 games last year. So
they got a Mayo bath, Tyler. You're forgetting the real highlight of the season.
The one everybody looks forward to.
They won the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
But the over-under on them is 6, by the way.
Okay, the over-under on them is 6. I'm going to say South Carolina wins 7. I think they find a way. My big one's they upset Texas A&M. That is my big
hilarious. I would love that.
I
would love that.
I think Spencer Rattler, that will be his game where he comes out and balls out, plays well against Missouri, Vandy, Florida, and then you wonder where the heck he was against Clemson. You wonder where that Spencer Rattler was when it comes up in a big game. I think he'll be streaky this year.
Well, I think he's going to be playing for his life. Like, this
is
a guy trying to rebuild his draft stock. Remember, before last year, he was going to be him and Sam Howell were the 1-2.
Yep.
I mean,
what a crazy world we lived in last year.
I liked him.
I mean, and it's nuts. But, yeah, I think he's going to be playing for his life. It's just, is there enough talent around him? That's my main concern. But I do think, like Andrew said, that change of scenery is going to do wonders for Rattler. And having a guy in Shane Bieber that's truly in his corner because it just felt like, with whatever reason for Lincoln Riley, he never really trusted Spencer. And there was reasons for that. We saw some flaws in his game, but good Lord, the man won you 10 games is, redshirt freshman year, whatever it was. So, you got to trust him at some point.
I think Shane Beamer, he has to put his trust in him.
Yeah.
What else do you have?
Ryan Olinsky.
Besides, wow, Tyler. Wow, Tyler. Being mean. How dare you?
Sorry.
But it's going to be a weird time for them. Now I'm going to flip gears here, moving on to not Texas A&M. We'll come back to them. But we're going to start after every roadblock gets thrown at me here by the computer because, of course, it has to. I think it's getting sleepy as well. Alabama, the defending runner-up, but SEC champion. But they lost to Georgia in the national championship game. That's the one they're going to talk about. Nick Saban recently said, we had a 13-2 team. We had a good rebuilding year. And just imagine being 13-2 and having a rebuilding year. I wish. That's all I can say.
And having the Heisman winner. You had the Heisman winner in a quote-unquote rebuilding year.
But you look at Alabama's schedule. Utah State to start the year, going to Texas, Louisiana Monroe. Man, Louisiana Monroe is going to get Alabama and Texas. They're trying to win that 3-way trophy. But Vanderbilt at home, going to Arkansas. Texas A&M's the one everyone has scheduled based on what happened this offseason. Going to Tennessee, getting Mississippi State at home. Bye week, going to LSU, going to Ole Miss, playing Austin Peay. Obviously, the trap game of the year. Could you just imagine for 1 second, Austin Peay beats Alabama?
I can't.
You can't even
in a fake world.
Even in a fake world, you can't imagine it. But hey, they're on the schedule, and then Auburn at home. It's going to be another fun year for Alabama. That's all you can say. It's going to be a fun year. Imagine being 13-2 and being a rebuilding year. And now you have Bryce Young, but you have one problem. Who is he going to throw the ball to? There's almost no one you can think of. Jameson Williams, he's gone. Mechie, he's gone. Everyone is going away, but they still have that defense. Will Anderson Jr. is still there. They have a lot of defensive guys. I mean, Henry To'oTo'o, Byron Young, Jordan Battle. They have a lot of great defensive talent. It'll feel like watching the old Alabama teams, I think early A.J. McCarron era, where you have a great quarterback. You'll figure out your run game. You're Alabama. You're going to figure out your run game. You're going to figure out your wide receivers and tight ends and all of that. You're going to see a lot of great defense from the Crimson Tide this year, and it might be the defense carrying them for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I just kind of looking at their schedule. Either they run their table to the SEC title, or they drop a game, which they have a tendency of doing. And it's just a matter of who's going to be that team. I will say right now, it's not going to be A&M this year. I think that's going to be they're going to. I know we're going to eventually get to A&M, but it's like
Don't
I know
worry,
A&M has A&M has some solid talent, but I think it's going to be a revenge game where Alabama shows no mercy. So that just, and also I haven't been really that big on A&M as much. But I think Ole Miss might be the one team that could probably get a drop on them, since it will be in the Grove. But other than that, it's really hard to say if anyone's going to actually give them a run for their money.
See, well, I don't think a team will. I think if there was a team, you guys probably know a lot better than I do who they're bringing back. But right before that highly circled Texas A&M game, I feel like at Arkansas and Fayetteville would be the trap game here for Alabama.
Probably.
I think they got a couple. I mean, you mentioned Arkansas is definitely a top one. You get a big one over A&M, right? And then you got to go turn around and play Tennessee. Connor mentioned the Ole Miss game. That's not a gimme. You got Texas to start the season. From just looking at previous schedule, this might be the toughest road set that Bama's had for a schedule in quite a few years. I mean, those are all pretty much, with the exception of, I don't know, maybe, I don't even see what LSU might be a gimme, right, in terms of that. Like, you would expect them to beat LSU, but all those road games are your toughest games of the season, just about, other than the A&M one. So
we're saying Alabama has 3 losses this year.
Right? That would be remarkable. That'd be hilarious.
That would be that'd be saying, "Oh my God!" It's like, "Oh my, thank you God." That'd be like, "Thank you God."
As
breaking, NCAA announces 20-team playoff.
Yeah. That defense might carry them. I mean, they brought back. So Will Anderson, if you pay attention to Kuiper or McShay, if Will Anderson was able to come out this past year in the draft, he would have been the number 1 pick. He's that good.
Yeah.
And they've got so much of those guys coming back that were just young last year. That's why Saban, I think, called it a rebuilding year, as crazy as that sounds, because they had a really young defense. Nobody really talked about that. You know, it performed, and you expect them to because they're Bama.
Well, it's because everyone was mainly looking at that offense a lot.
Oh, yeah, you had the Heisman winner.
Because you had the Heisman winner, and plus you had really great skill players around it. But that defense is going to take the next step. I think they could probably dethrone Georgia as the best defense in the country if things go if they play like it. But who knows? But it's mainly going to come down to how does Bryce Young perform without established wide receivers and how the run game is going to be, because that's going to be a question mark. No one's going to question mark how good Bryce Young is. It's a matter of who's going to be around him.
Tyler, do we have a over/under on win totals for Alabama?
I
want to assume it's like double digits.
10.5 is what they've got.
Really?
10.5.
I'd say 11 or 12, either 11 or undefeated. That's where Bama will be at.
And that's the crazy thing for me is, despite going to Texas, despite going to Arkansas, Texas A&M will be big. Going to Tennessee, going to LSU, going to Ole Miss, I still think they go undefeated.
Well,
I think it'll be like last year. They'll have a lot of close calls.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I think the biggest one of all of them, I agree with you, Andrew, at Arkansas. That's a place they historically have weird times. I'll never forget Brett Bielema's coached Arkansas, was a missed extra point and a missed 25-yard field goal away from beating them in 2014. With KJ Jefferson back, the Hogs, I think, are legit. We'll get to them in a little bit. That's their best shot of losing if you're Alabama. But I still think they somehow find a way to survive that game.
I mean, it's like the Patriots, right, with Brady. You just don't pick against them because you go, no matter how it looks, they've got Belichick, they got Brady. That's
Yeah.
all they need.
Yeah.
So they got Saban, they got the Heisman winner. Well, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, what you do is nearly knock the monitor over.
I talk with my hands every once in a while.
It's okay. It is A-okay. But you look at the other team in the SEC West that everyone believes in, especially if you're a Texas A&M fan, it's Texas A&M. What a shocker. They believe in their team a lot. They got the number 1 recruiting class, so obviously they're going 18-0. That's happening. Believe it, folks. You heard it here first. They start the year with Sam Houston State, getting App State at home. App State, always spooky. Always a spooky team. Never sleep on App State.
I would say same.
A favorite in the Sun Belt this year.
Yes.
Might actually, they returned 15 starters to Appalachian State,
Yes.
so that's going to be a senior-laden squad.
Yes,
I
it
would
is.
say with Sam Houston, they're good. They're a good FCS school.
They're a good FCS school.
I mean, I'm not saying like they're going to beat A&M, and just one of those. That's a game they'll probably play close with them since they're pretty solid in the FCS. But
Yeah.
Appalachian State, that's going to be a spooky one because Appalachian State's usually pretty good. Then you play Miami, but I have no idea how Miami's going to be. Are they going to be really bad, or they're going to have 8 wins? That's just going to be weird.
They retired the turnover chain, so we'll have to see what happens with them.
Improvement already.
Yeah.
But Miami and then Arkansas at AT&T Stadium, at Mississippi State, at Alabama, bye week at South Carolina, Ole Miss, Florida at home, going to Auburn, UMass at home, trying to score 80, I guess, and that one's probably what we're going to see, and then LSU at home to end the year. But looking at it, I don't know. A&M's a team that I think is full of surprises because the way they're built defensively, they're going to be amazing to watch. They have great players all around, but they don't have a quarterback yet, and that's their real issue. You can't have a great offense if you don't have even a good quarterback. You don't even need a great one.
Okay, now taking that into equation,
Well,
that's rethinking what I think how well they'll do.
And, with the quarterback thing, Cade, you mentioned it. You look around the SEC, there's going to be a lot of dang good quarterbacks.
There
this
are.
year. I mean, there were some that transferred in. We talk about Ole Miss. They've got Jackson Dart, who left USC when he realized, Lincoln's coming in. He's going to bring in his boy Caleb Williams. That's going to be a potent offense. We talk about Florida, despite maybe not having the talent around them. Anthony Richardson's going to be really good. Bama, of course, got the Heisman winner. Mississippi State, you got Mike Leach. That's like having 2 quarterbacks. Arkansas, Sam Pittman, I can't comment enough at the job he has done to build that team up. And KJ Jefferson, as you mentioned, that's just, you got to have a quarterback to compete. And A&M's got everything but that. They don't have their Johnny Manziel. They just
They don't have Johnny Manziel or Mike Evans.
Oh man. But yeah, that's what holds this team up. I mean, they're, if you just took away the quarterback position, you say, wow, that's a 10-11-1 team. Then you go, well, wait, who's throwing the ball? It's just, you got to have it.
I still think they'd be a pretty good team.
I think he's like 9 wins or something like that.
I was going to say 8 wins.
Yeah, I was
only because I already picked South Carolina beat them, so I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that was my 7th win there for South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say 8 wins.
Yeah, initially I was like, because I obviously hearing how talented they were, that was me conveniently forgetting about the quarterback problem. I was going to say probably 9 or 10, but now you take into account the quarterback situation, I'd say 8 or 9. Like, I think 9 would probably be the best they could get. 8 is because just they'll like you're probably saying the trap game for South Carolina. I would go with that also. That might be adding a win for them, but that's for South Carolina. But that's probably one. I don't they'll Arkansas, Alabama are losses. Actually, I would say Mississippi State would probably be a loss for them.
They did lose to him last year.
So, and I'd say Ole Miss, and then they probably get the rest of their schedule. They probably could lose a game to Appalachian State. Who knows? Because Appalachian State's usually pretty good.
Who knows? They could win a 13-10 type game.
So that's either 7. Either I gave them 7 or 8 right there.
So the over/under is 8.5. I'm going 7-5 with A&M.
Ooh,
7-5.
Okay.
I think they drop. Miami is not going to be back per se, but I think they're going to prove a lot under Mario Cristobal very quickly. That could be an early, they kind of sleep past that game. And really, I mean, conference-wise, this could get ugly. And at the end of the season, old Jimbo Big Time Fisher could be facing a buyout on that $100 million.
Well, I've got to say, Texas A&M will not go 8-4. Those days are over. We are in the 7-5 era of Texas A&M football. They will lose to Miami.
Wow.
They will lose to Arkansas.
They'll lose
They
to
will
Appalachian
lose
State.
to Alabama.
They
They will lose at
Okay,
South
I think-
Carolina.
okay, I
They
think
will
they're-
lose to Ole Miss, and then they will beat Florida, Auburn, UMass, LSU.
Kate, I'm sorry, but they're more likely to lose to Appalachian State than Miami.
Miami is back. You heard it here first.
That's right. We just talked about it.
Tyler Van Dyke is that dude.
He's the dude.
Mario Cristobal can build them back. I'm not saying
Took over the
elite.
Turner of the
I'm not
team.
saying 12
That
and
is
0.
way too much faith
I'm
in
saying
Miami.
10 to 11 wins. I loved what he did last year. I'm going to spoil my ACC take. Miami wins the Coastal. I'm going to say that.
I've got to win the
I'm-
Coastal.
I'm
I've got
not
them losing to
big on Miami.
Clemson.
I
but,
don't-
Yeah, that's my
the
thing
Coastal's
too.
not strong.
I
That's the
think-
thing. Like, they could rack up easy wins at the
Yeah,
Coastal.
who's
so.
going to stop them? Pitt. That's about it. All the good ACC teams are in the Atlantic. I'm getting ahead of myself. I like Miami. I like Arkansas. Mississippi State, I think, will be a tough game, but they'll be desperately needing a win, so they'll get it. But Will Rogers, I think he'll give them a few problems. They'll lose at Alabama. That might be blowout alert right there. That game might be pretty tough. At South Carolina, I already called that as an upset for the Gamecocks. I think they'll get close to upsetting Ole Miss at home. It'll be one of those like, oh man, what are they going to do type games. I think they lose that game and then beat the rest of their schedule. So I would like to see what A&M can do, but man, without a quarterback, I just don't believe in them. I don't believe they can do anything. Even with Calzada last year, we saw that he was serviceable, and yeah, they beat Alabama, but it took everything going right for them. And I mean special teams, defense, offense, and they still got lucky to win that game. As much fun as it was, I just don't believe in Texas A&M. They're like Texas now. You got to show me something. And if you can't show me anything but 8-4 and disappointment and maybe a good win here and there, there's nothing to go for A&M. But that's just me.
Y'all better watch that Tyler Van Dyke film. That's all I got to say. We'll get to that. That's why we're friends, guys. That's why we get each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were raised the same way practically, just in different parts of Oklahoma.
It's like Miami's brought in many talented players, but it's like you guys being high on, like, okay, I can give you them winning their division, but
Yeah.
it's like I have more confidence for Appalachian State to beat A&M than Miami.
And see, I could see
Miami
App
is
State
just
winning that game,
not-
though.
It's like Miami is just not. I just don't. I'm not. I know we'll get to them, but it's like Miami. Seriously, it's like they're more likely to pull 8 or 9, not have like anything crazy out there. Them
Yeah.
going 10-2 is like that's a bit of a stretch.
I mean, they go 8 wins and you can still beat Texas A&M. They don't have to win 10 to beat A&M.
Yeah, they don't have to. But we'll get to Ole Miss now.
That's more really referring to this, like you guys being high on Miami. That's where I'm a bit not really with you guys. On
Well,
that.
we'll get to Miami when we get to Miami. We first got to get to Ole Miss. The Lane train continues. Got new quarterback, Jackson Dart. Got a new running back. You're going to want to watch him is Zach Evans. I know, Tyler, we talked about him already on the show. He's going to be fun to watch. Didn't really play at TCU, but anytime you get a 5-star running back, you have the potential for an extremely versatile offense. But this Ole Miss team, you start out with Troy and Central Arkansas. You go to Georgia Tech. That's your big non-con game right there. And then you get Tulsa at home. Tulsa's a bit interesting. Tulsa's a bit scrappy. I mean, we saw them do it to Ohio State. They had a mission to take down OSU's last year.
They finished as one of the hottest teams in the country. Won
They
like
did.
4 or 5 straight to make bowl game.
They did. And then
So-
Kentucky at home, go to Vandy, get Auburn at home, go to LSU, go to A&M, bye week before Alabama, and that's a home game. Just saying that if Alabama loses a game, that might be one of them. And then go to Arkansas, and then the Egg Bowl to end the year, one of Thanksgiving's greatest games. Tyler, don't laugh. You know it's true.
Hey, it's great.
What other game has some of the hijinks? Matt Corral punching a dude and then not getting flagged or ejected.
Oh, man. Well, just the coaching matchup of Lane Kiffin and Mike
Yeah, it's great.
all-timer. But no, so I don't know if y'all saw it back in SEC Media Days. You had Lane Kiffin complaining about we've legalized cheating, right?
And he signed a mustard ball.
Yeah. But guess who won the transfer portal? Lane Kiffin. I wonder how he did that one. Clearly, he does it the right way, as he'll tell
Yes.
you. But, no, yeah, you bring in Jackson Dart for a perfect offense for him to run in. I'm sure, in year one without Jeff Lebby, they won't change it up too much. I assume Kiffin's going to take over more kind of the play calling duties again. And then Zach Evans, that's something they needed on this team, was a really good running back. And that guy, if you look around, he was the highest kind of offensive prize, if you will, in the portal, other than, I guess, Caleb Williams, you could say maybe. But people kind of knew that if he goes, it was to USC. So getting that is huge. And you look at the schedule, and you say, okay, you got your pitfalls a little bit. You got to go to A&M. That's not a gimme, even though we're not all high on A&M. But other than that, I mean, I'd say that the game, even more so than Bama that I'd circle that they got to watch themselves, is Arkansas. Other than that, if they could take care of Bama at home, they could roll into that other undefeated. Like, they really could. So I am very high on the Lane train. Give me 10-win Ole Miss. Sleeper.
I'd say 9 or 10 wins for them. They're only probably major losses. I'd say Arkansas and Mississippi State could be a flip on who takes that second, who gives them a second loss. But they could lose all their last 3 games, or they win two of the last 3. It just kind of depends. But they're more like, I'd say drop to Alabama and drop 1 to Arkansas.
Yeah, I think the offense is gonna be exciting, but I think I'll go 9 wins.
I want to present a scenario to all of you.
Oh, Lord.
Well, first of all, Tyler already probably knows what I'm getting at here. Ole Miss they're going to run through September. Your only big challenge really is Tulsa. Georgia Tech's not that big of a fight, to be completely
I know I was low on Kentucky, but I think
Kentucky's October 1st.
Oh, you said through September.
I said
okay,
through September.
My
I win
bad,
by
my
one
fault.
day.
One
Technicality.
day. Yep, there you go.
They beat Kentucky in a close game. They're 5-0. They roll Vandy. They're 6-0. They beat Auburn in a hard game. They're 7-0.
Auburn's not good. They'll roll.
Auburn has Tank Bigsby though, and he can give people problems.
That's all they got, and he's not much of a take.
Okay, that's Tank. They beat LSU. They beat Texas A&M. They're 9-0. Alabama comes to town. It's college game day, SEC game of the week, CBS. Play CBS jingle in your head, whatever you want to do. Close game. Alabama's winning by 4. Jackson Dart has it. They march down the field. They throw a pick in the end zone. And then they lose to Arkansas next week and the season falls apart. And I'll take 10 in a close heartbreaker to Alabama. That's Ole Miss's season. The Lane train was so close, but it gets derailed at the end. That's my season for Ole Miss. 9-0 start, and then 1 out of your final 3.
That's still 10 win. I mean, that's
it's still 10
Lane,
wins.
Lane would be doing champagne bass if he got 10 wins in the
Yeah.
SEC this year. I'm just telling you.
That's what I'm saying with Ole Miss. I like them. I think they're a good offensive team, but the second they run into a truly elite defense, they will crumble a bit. Not completely. They have the offense to battle back, but you'll see what happens when they get punched in the mouth. We saw it against Baylor last year. But I guess we move on to Arkansas since we've hyped them up so much. It's probably
12-0, though.
Okay.
16-0.
That's a take right there.
16-0 Arkansas.
Complete kidding.
But Arkansas, I mean, they do start the schedule with a bang. You get Cincinnati, you get a playoff team right out the gate, and then you take on South Carolina at home. You get Missouri State at home. How about the Bobby Petrino game? How about that? Bobby Petrino's Missouri State comes to Fayetteville. There's history there, folks. And then Texas A&M in Arlington, Alabama at home. You play, your first 5 games, 4 of them are at home, and against 2 playoff teams from last year. That is an amazing home slate. And then you go to Mississippi State, go to BYU, bye week, go to Auburn, get Liberty at home, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and then go to Missouri for a game they call Armageddon, even though I'm the only person that calls it that, despite CBS trying.
But you are they.
I am they. Many people have said this. I am they.
All 5 people.
I am at all 2 people that call it that game. Me and the guy who ever made it up at the SEC headquarters.
It's really hard to say where they'll be at because I'm not sure how Cincinnati overall will be since they lost quite a bit of players of the draft. Because for Cincinnati, I mean, unless they run run into issues with SMU or Houston. If they beat Arkansas, they go undefeated, the way I see it. But, well, I'll save that for when if we ever get to them. But, you know what? Screw it. Arkansas takes Cincinnati out. Then they pretty much win games up till they play Alabama. I think that'll be a really close one game at home, but I think Alabama gets out with a win. They could eat. The way I see it, if that, I don't know how things go, they only lose one game, and that's to Alabama.
Yeah.
Way I'm looking at their schedule, they could, besides Alabama, they run the table.
It's going to come down to Alabama and Ole Miss, and especially in Cade's scenario. If Ole Miss does go into that game and both teams have one loss, that could be like huge, not only for the standings, but a future, maybe a playoff.
Mm-hmm. This could be Arkansas's year to try to make a playoff push.
So Arkansas, while bringing back talent, similar to some of the other more mid-tier teams we talked about in the SEC, I think still a little bit struggling from depth, right? Like Sam Pittman's developed well, he's recruited well, but those classes aren't quite there fully yet. So I see a range of, and this is Arkansas's kind of weird spot, 7 to 9 wins. Now, y'all are disrespecting my boys BYU. Jaron Hall is going to be a Heisman contender if he stays healthy. They're not winning that game in Provo. I'm telling you now. Take BYU. They're not beating Bama, though.
Oh, I completely forgot. I did not see BYU on the schedule. I was not paying
Conveniently
attention.
The blue helmet snuck up.
Conveniently forgot. I get you. Anyways, Ole Miss, I think
everyone
they lose that one. Because I think Ole Miss at the end has more talent. But South Carolina, I think, to me, is kind of a toss-up. A&M's not a gimme. So they could beat those teams, and they wind up with 3 losses, and then maybe they lose to South Carolina and A&M, then all of a sudden you're 7-5. So it's kind of where I sit on. But they're probably the biggest question mark to me in the SEC. So
Since BYU's on there, I'd say that give them 10 wins. I completely skimmed over them because I didn't even think they were playing BYU at all.
Tell me how you really feel. You don't care about BYU. You're a Big 12 member. I see that. Tell me how you care.
If I would have noticed them, I probably would have not said they would have probably beaten BYU.
Well, here's the thing. I do notice BYU.
one.
I do notice BYU, and I still think Arkansas. Give
Hot
me
take.
11-win Hogs.
Oh, my God.
They only lose to Alabama.
If
they
do
beat
that,
everybody
KJ
else.
Jefferson is thrown for
KJ
4,000
Jefferson is a mini Cam Newton. That man can just break tackles like crazy. He's built like him. He's got the strength. He can throw it to anyone. He's got Jaden Hazelwood to throw the ball now. And you look at some of their linebackers. You got Bumper Poole. You got people like that.
Great name, Bunker
Great,
Poole.
all American name right there. That's a baseball name right there, but he's playing football. I love this Arkansas team. I loved what they were able to do last year. They got 9 wins last year, and they're only going up. I think they'll hit that jukebox a lot more this year, as Sam Putman would put it.
Man.
This is my crazy one. The SEC West is going to be back in a big way, minus Texas A&M. Alabama going undefeated, 1-loss Arkansas, 2-loss Ole Miss. I think this will be an amazing SEC West this year. I really do.
Probably a 9-3 Mississippi State team, depending on how their schedule goes.
Well, conveniently, Connor, the next team we're talking about is Mississippi State. They've got the Cowboy quarterback himself, Will Rogers, and they got Mike Leach. So there's nothing they can't do in terms of offense. They can absolutely sling the ball whenever they want to. They went 7-6 last year. They're still trying to build back. And boy, do they have a fun test to get things going with Memphis. Consistently a good team from the American. Power 6 if you're an American fan. Group of 5 if you're not an American fan. Tyler's giving me the thumbs down over
Memphis
here.
is trash now. They
Memphis
fell far.
Memphis has been good, but like you said, Tyler, I don't think they're going to be there. Hey, they might give them a game, though. You never know. They gave them a game last year. You never know, Tyler. But you look at their next game, they go to Arizona. They should win that one pretty handily. You go to LSU. You get Bowling Green at home. Texas A&M, Arkansas, those are all at home. You go to Kentucky, go to Alabama, go into the bye week, come back, get Auburn, Georgia, East Tennessee State, and then at Ole Miss. So a bit of an odd balance schedule-wise where you get a few weeks where it's big and then a few weeks where it's light. You keep going between heavy and light, and this is going to be a weird Mississippi State team. I mean, what Mike Leach team isn't weird in a way? They all are. I mean, best interview in all of college football, always. Going to say some pirate or just about Pirates. It's going to happen. It's great. But it's going to be a weird season for Mississippi State. I could see them being really good. I could see them being really bad.
I think they're just going to have a down year just because of the games they got to play.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily because of their talent, just who they got to go up against. I already said I'm a little higher on A&M than you guys, so I think that's a tough game. Arkansas, I see them losing that game. Kentucky, I could see them losing on the road. Alabama, I think, is a loss. Georgia's a loss. Ole Miss is a loss. So I think it's going to be a down year for Mississippi State.
Probably like a 7-5 season, something like that.
I think less than that. But A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss. That's six losses
that's
right
six
there.
losses right there.
Yeah,
I'm not because A&M doesn't have mainly just you gotta have at least a solid quarterback to really help you get through. That's where it's kind of a knock on A&M, but Mike Leach teams are a bit, especially his time at Mississippi State. It's been very chaotic because it's like they'll beat up a really good team and then all of a sudden they'll just lose to teams that it's like you lost. It's kind of like one of those weird things with the way his teams are, but I'd say their A&M's not a guaranteed, but I'll count that as a win toward their schedule. They'll just lose to Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, and I probably would more likely give them the Ole Miss, so they got 5 lots, so they go 7-5.
They're beating Ole Miss in Oxford?
No, I said
no. He's giving Ole Miss.
My bad. I was
Ole
about to
Miss
say. I
the
was
win.
like,
I'm getting Ole Miss the win. I don't see.
I was like, this might get ugly. Like, no.
It's like, they're going 7. I think they're either go 6-6 or 7-5.
No. Yeah, I think you guys are kind of. I'm more down on them as well. Stop me if you've heard this before. Mike Leach has an explosive and fun offense led by an interesting quarterback in Will Rogers, but his defense is bottom tier in pass coverage in the league. Yep. Oh, where have we heard that before? And it's not a good combination.
Yeah, stares at Washington State.
Yeah, it's just not that does not lead to wins, right? It makes it fun, and they may challenge in a lot of these games. They give maybe A&M, Arkansas, some troubles. But ultimately, I don't see this team being able to pull them down the stretch. I'd say about 6 wins is where I've got them. Over under, they've got about 6.5. I think that's fair. Because non-con ain't too bad. That Titan that Memphis is going to be tough. But no, they can beat Arizona. They can beat Bowling Green. It's just you get into conference play and you're hunting for wins. That's going to be tough.
I guess I'm the lowest on Mississippi State. I've got them at 5-7 this year.
Oh.
I think the tone gets set when they blow a double-digit lead at LSU. That's my bold take. The tone gets set when Will Rogers gets stopped because they figure out that, oh, hey, they're up, let's say 45-31 in the fourth quarter, and they try to throw a screen pass on 3rd and 13 for some reason or some random Mike Leach thing. LSU gets a stop, scores, does something incredible, ties the game, wins it on a walk-off field goal or something like that. And that'll set the tone. I think they'll beat Bowling Green. They lose to A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama all in a row. That really derails the season. They come back off that bye. They beat Auburn at home. Then they get crushed by Georgia. And then they get their win over East Tennessee State. They're fighting for their life, and they do not win the Egg Bowl this year.
Cade built up the Pirate just to slap him down.
Hey, sometimes you got to do that. That's the business. Auburn's the team, though, I think I am the least high on. They got Tank Bigsby, like you said, Tyler, but that is about it.
Brian Harson's getting fired. I'm sorry. It's happening.
They nearly fired him already.
I know. It's about
they got
5 games into the season.
They've got one of the best big games. I mean, how about Penn State getting to come down to the Plain? That is going to be fun. It's going to be a great experience for Penn State fans. That's all I'm going to say. Penn State fans are going to get a free win and a trip to Alabama. And the trip to Alabama is the second most exciting thing on that thing. They'll get Mercer and San Jose State at home. They get Penn State, Missouri, LSU. You get your first 5 games at home. How about that? You do not leave the state for over a month, and then you leave one time and you got to play Georgia. Then you go to Ole Miss, bye week, come back home, get Arkansas, go to Mississippi State, A&M at home, Western Kentucky at home, and then you go to Alabama. So a bit of a rough schedule for Auburn.
I go 3-9. I just kind of looking at all the games they have to play. Especially just obviously, I don't think any of us are high on Auburn at all. But it's just like I can see games where they can play competitive for no reason.
I mean, that's every Auburn team.
So, but I just don't see who they have at quarterback. there's just no way they're gonna be able to win any big games.
I think they grab at least 5. I mean, Mercer, San Jose, Missouri, LSU, WKU.
Okay,
And then,
I see.
maybe they take an A&M or Mississippi State.
No, I'm at 5 with you. I think LSU and Missouri are winnable games. And then, of course, you just schedule these cupcakes in Mercer and San Jose and Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky doesn't even have Bailey Zappi anymore. It's ridiculous what a cupcake that one is.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, that's ugly.
Dang.
Arkansas at home, yeah, but Arkansas is more talented. Mississippi State maybe is your one win that could get you in at a 6-6, just because it's Mike Leach. We was talking about the inconsistency with that Mississippi State team, so maybe. But other than that, yeah, I see 6 as the ceiling for this team, and more likely probably 5-7.
I think they go 5-7 as well. You look at it, I think they'll start the year 3-1. They'll beat LSU. People will be believing, 4-1. Maybe Auburn can do something. And then they'll run into that buzzsaw, and it'll just absolutely end any conversation anyone could ever try to bring up about Auburn being relevant this year.
They'll be ranked for no reason at 4-1, despite getting humiliated by Penn State. They'll still put them in the top.
No, they'll do this. They'll go, well, Auburn lost to a really good Penn State team by 21 at home. But
Yes,
you know what?
yes.
Sean Clifford played the game of his life. I believe Auburn's going to shock the world and beat Georgia. And then they'll get beat like 42-7.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be hilarious, and then Auburn will never see the light of day ever again. That's what's going to happen with them. But we got one final SEC team to bring up, and that is LSU. They start the year in a fun way. Labor Day game, Sunday, September 4th against Florida State in New Orleans. Big neutral site game, just 15 minutes from your home. Maybe not even that. And then you get a weird one in the Battle of Baton Rouge with Southern. We don't see this a whole lot, but HBCU coming to Tiger Stadium should be a fun, at least halftime show will be fun. We can guarantee that will be an amazing halftime show there. Then you get Mississippi State at home, New Mexico at home. You go to Auburn. You get Tennessee at home. You go to Florida, then Ole Miss, then bye week, Alabama, at Arkansas, UAB, and then at Texas A&M. So LSU in Brian Kelly's first year, he has his work cut out for him.
Absolutely, and I said earlier, I think this is an intriguing team to see how he goes in there. Obviously, things went downhill with Notre Dame, not even that much downhill. They're still a competitive team. When he goes to the SEC, takes over a new conference here. Obviously, tough recruit. He lost a couple recruits to some other SEC schools here, but I think he'll adjust. I think it's going to be a big adjustment year before LSU kind of gets back to where they're at.
So, just by the schedule, they kind of got a lot of breaks. You got to get Bama, of course. You're at Arkansas, that's tough. You're at A&M, and then you get Tennessee. But other than that, I mean, there's winnable games that you draw. That being said, I'm not necessarily. Well, I'm more not the biggest Brian Kelly guy. Let's put it that way. And Cade, to add to your Southern comment, as a guy who went to HBCU, those halftime shows are legit. Boy, they get exciting. But I see probably about 5 to 6 wins in here. They've got enough cupcakes in the schedule. New Mexico, and you know what? Take that back. UAB might actually be top of their conference. I just don't know if that means, hey, you're good enough to beat LSU even on a down year. It's not going to be an easy one, but they can still win that. Southern's going to be I'm not a believer in Mike Norville and Florida State, so I don't think they're very good. I'd say 5 to 6 is where I'm sitting at. You're fighting for bowl eligibility.
Yeah, I was probably going to just mainly give them 5 wins. If it's a 6-1, it'd be Mississippi State, and we've talked about them. They're as likely, Mississippi State is likely to drop a game to LSU than win it. But even though UAB is talented, it's one of those things. Will they actually get that?
Right.
But
yeah,
I would like to think they would get if Mississippi State beats LSU, I'd probably give the game to they get UAB. But if they don't, I would reverse it and get UAB would get one on them. So I'd still keep them at 5.
I got LSU as a 7-win team this year. I think they start 5-0. You look at that: Florida State, Southern, Mississippi State, New Mexico, and Auburn. They can win all 5 of those games. Then the real season begins. You get Tennessee, I think that's a loss. I think they win at Florida. That's just a battle of two rivals that are still trying to find their footing. LSU gets that, then they lose to Ole Miss, Bama, Arkansas. I think they just barely beat UAB. I think it's going to be like those Troy games, if you remember those.
Oh, man, Troy has a team.
It's going to be one of those. UAB's going to, they might get like a pick six or run the opening kickoff back or something. And everyone goes, oh, boy, here we go. And LSU finds a way to gut out like a 31-28 win. And then I think they find a way.
No, Cade.
They find a way to keep it close.
Don't do it, Cade.
They keep it close. They keep it close. And then they pull it out.
Oh, okay.
And LSU goes 7-5.
That's how you know we've been on too long. Cade's picking LSU to beat A&M.
It can happen again. It happened last year.
They had Max Johnson. He left. They were so mad he left.
It can't.
Not only beating them, but on the road too.
It can happen again. I don't believe in A&M. You know this. I just don't believe in them. I have no faith in them, and I'm going to quit talking about them because now it's time to talk about a really good team that we all know that they're pretty good. There's this team called Ohio State.
Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes. They start the year.
You challenge out the gate.
They start the year with Notre Dame, one of the big-time games. And then you get Arkansas State, you get Toledo, you get Wisconsin, you get Rutgers, all at home. Your first 5 games at home. And then you go to Michigan State, first big-time game on the road. Bye week, Iowa at home, at Penn State, at Northwestern. And then you get Indiana at Maryland, and then Michigan at home this year. Definitely wanting revenge for what happened at Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I've got Ohio State, to be honest, is, outside of Alabama, Georgia. This is the next best team in the country to me, and they might wind up being better than Georgia. I think really it comes down to them at Bama in the national picture for me. I don't see them getting challenged in the Big Ten this year. I just don't. I think Michigan takes a big enough step back that's going to be, and as you mentioned, the revenge factor on top of that. It might be a beatdown. So I think their earliest and most difficult challenge the entire season is Wisconsin. But you get it at home. So, I mean, other than that, you look through that, I just don't see – I got them going undefeated in the regular season.
I'm going to say they'll have – either they'll go 11-1 or 10-2.
Who they lose 2 games to?
They can lose the Irish.
Notre Dame lost a lot.
I think they're going to be solid unit and might still get one on them.
8-win Notre Dame.
That's your take? Okay. We'll get to Notre Dame when we get to
will say
Notre Dame.
this. I think Ohio State's going to fix their again, I love Jim Knowles. I think he's going to go in and fix that defense.
That's why I got them undefeated.
Yeah, the only team maybe just because of how fun the atmosphere is at night is Penn State. Maybe they go. That's the only loss.
That'll probably be a white
That's
out.
their toughest
You get the
road
white
game.
out. You just get that atmosphere. And I don't know. Maybe Penn State's coming off a bye too. We haven't seen their schedule yet.
No, they're next.
But
I'm saying is they're more likely to go 11-1, and the loss would be to Penn State. But if I was choosing 2, it'd be Notre Dame and Penn State, mainly because just just not being mentally prepared and also having to make different adjustments because it's a Jim Knowles defense.
But remember, Notre Dame's new head coach is Marcus Freeman, who is an Ohio State guy. So I promise you, Ryan Day will have that team mentally prepared for Notre Dame to start the season because he's going to say we're going to hang half 100 on them. That's like Barry Switzer going.
Because Barry Switzer going to come back.
And walking over to Texas and say, I'll coach for you. You bet your butt. Bob Sue would say, okay, we're going to go clean these guys' clocks.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be that type of game. But you mentioned the defense, Andrew. That's going to get fixed. And not only that, C.J. Stroud hadn't gone anywhere. I've got him as my Heisman winner. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was the third receiver in that group, outproduced Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, who were both top 15 picks in the draft. Oh, and by the way, they got Marvin Harrison Jr. on that roster as well.
And don't forget Travion Henderson.
You can't mention the SEC teams without depth. Ohio State's the opposite.
Yeah, Ohio State's got all the depth right now, man.
See, it's like all the players that they have there at Ohio State, obviously on paper top three team, but the way they severely underperformed last year, not offensively, but defensively. I'm talking about like they should have went undefeated.
To be fair, Ryan Day agrees with this. He did say 11-2 was a horrible year for them.
That's what I mean by
underperforming.
With what they had, with what Ohio State has, that was an underperform. It seemed like they played a good amount of that year. It didn't feel like they were really like they should have teams they probably should have beaten the living heck out of. Sometimes they just didn't really do it. I mean, anyways, but it's just like I'd say to be fair with them, they just drop the game in Happy Valley, and then they run the rest of the table. They get their revenge on Michigan with no worries.
The only problem with that Penn State game, and we'll probably talk about him, is I have no faith in James Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is completely.
I mean, it's like if they don't lose the one game, then like you said, Tyler, they go undefeated.
I think as long as they get past Wisconsin, they're good.
But I will say, it's like way their conference is set up. It's just like it's either the rest of the teams in their division are on a down year, or they're playing. It's like you'd probably say their toughest team and that's not in their division is Wisconsin, and then that's pretty much it. They're not challenged by anybody from the West Division, and then the East is just kind of like, eh. And I have no idea how good Michigan will actually be because they lost so much.
But I have a few words to say about Ohio State. Number one, C.J. Stroud. Yes. That's a big one. I agree with you, Tyler. That's my Heisman winner. Jackson Smith and he might win the Biletnikoff.
And he might win the Heisman.
He might win the
Heisman
too. We might have a Baker Mayfield and Hollywood Brown scenario where you got 1 and 4, or maybe some other crazy scenario that you could see. Travion Henderson at running back, he's going to be big. And you look at the defense, they've already got guys. They've got Zach Harrison on the D-line. They've got Denzel Burke at corner. They've got Ronnie Hickman at safety. They already have good defensive guys. Now with Jim Knowles there, now you have great defensive guys. And what was Ohio State's weakness that everyone could see from a mile away? The defense.
Well, the secondary specifically. They were really
specifically
young.
The secondary.
Yeah, and now they're another year older. With Knowles, they'll correct that, and they'll be okay.
Yeah, they will get everything fixed. It is hard for me to think Ohio State will lose a game like we all kind of think. I think if they do lose one, it's at Penn State. If they lose 2, it would be Notre Dame just because maybe something weird happens in that first game
that's why I was
that you wouldn't expect.
That's why I was saying 2, because something weird can happen.
Wisconsin's your 2.
Yeah, Wisconsin could be a good one with Braylon Allen at running back.
Well, do they have a quarterback?
It's Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin. They don't. Their quarterback is their running back.
Their quarterback has last year cost them several games, and the run game didn't fare very much last year.
Name the last time they had a 10-win team that had a notable quarterback. There's one in the 2000s. There's one. And they've had plenty of 10-win teams. Russell Wilson's your answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't it Russell Wilson?
Yep.
But I think Ohio State goes undefeated. They roll through the Big Ten title game because the West is not going to be that good this year in the Big Ten. It's going to be a battle of who can win 9 games out there in a good year. But I think Ohio State rolls through a pretty non-competitive. I mean, who's your 3rd best game on this schedule? Wisconsin. Who's your 4th best game?
Michigan State at Michigan State.
And that even probably won't be that good of a game. We saw what Ohio State did to Michigan State last year.
And they lost Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, and they're about like a Wisconsin team last year. They lost their offense. They lost Kenneth Walker. So looking at Penn State now, they start the year in another haunted atmosphere at Ross-Ade Stadium, home of the Boilermakers. You don't like playing there, especially on a Thursday night. That can get very intriguing first game of the year. Then you get Ohio at home. You go to Auburn. Hey, there's Central Michigan again. Andrew, I'm just saying, you got double Central Michigan as OSU and Penn State guy.
I'm not a Penn State guy.
I'm throwing you as a Penn State guy.
I'm from Pennsylvania, but
I'm throwing you as a Penn State guy. You're officially being designated as a Penn State guy.
Over here like my brother went there, got a key to the city, but I'm not Penn State.
Yeah.
Season ticket holder. Fly home for every home game.
You're now getting designated as a Penn State guy for the rest of the show.
You called me.
He's got a James Franklin face mask.
Yeah. Yeah. He secretly.
I said I didn't trust him, but that was just to go along with it.
Right. Yeah, it's just to go along with it. You're just. Well, that's how I know you don't trust him. That's only a true fan would not trust James Franklin. Sounds like something a Penn State fan would say. You get Northwestern at home. You have a bye week. Go to Michigan. Get Minnesota at home. Get Ohio State at home. Go to Indiana. Maryland at home, go to Rutgers, and then Michigan State for Senior Day. It should be a pretty good season for Penn State looking at it on paper. You look at some of these games, they would not surprise me if they started 5-0. You look at how that starts going into that bye week. You go to Michigan, that'll be a big game. Ohio State obviously is the giant one, as it should be. And then you look after Ohio State, the only real challenge is Michigan State. At Rutgers might be a fun game for a quarter, maybe two, but Penn State's looking pretty solid this year if they can just stay healthy and stay consistent. But those two things have been a challenge for the past few years.
I don't know. There's a lot of trap games on there. I could see it being a tough year for Penn State.
Literally, they got a trap game right out the gate with Purdue. So
it's also it's weird to see a Big Ten game to open up the year.
Yeah, well, they've been trying to do that now.
But that's a trap game. Auburn's that's always gonna be a tough one to go down there and play. At Michigan's gonna be tough. Ohio State's gonna be tough. I mean, well, I think they'll get Auburn and I think they'll beat Purdue. I mean, those games could go the other way if one or two things go wrong. Yeah. But I'll end here with I will say I guess they'll get 10 if they can get that Purdue and Auburn game. They'll probably end up getting 10 wins, losing to Michigan and Ohio State.
I'm still gonna go with where I'll just go with Ohio State goes 11-1 and they lose and Ohio State loses to Penn State because just trap game for Ohio State. I'd say their 2 losses Penn State gets is at Michigan and first game of the year. They win the rest of their games.
So the over-under is 8.5 on those guys. Just look at those. They've got them high up there. That being said, though, I got Penn State at 5 wins.
Really?
Ooh. 5 wins. They hadn't had a 100-yard rusher for now a season and a half. When's the last time we've been able to say about Penn State? That's terrible. That's what they used to do.
Yeah.
They've had some great running backs come through. Yeah. So they haven't been able to do that. And quite honestly, just a side agenda, I like Maryland. So they're losing to Maryland. They're losing to Michigan State. They're losing to Ohio State. They're losing to Minnesota. I got Minnesota as a sleeper for the Big Ten. Michigan they're losing to. They're losing to Auburn. And they might lose that Purdue game.
I just think they're too good of a team at home. I'd have a hard time believing they lose to Michigan State at home and then lose the Minnesota homecoming game. I think that does play a factor. I don't know. But again, like I said, they like an Auburn game, Purdue, that could go either way. So if they drop those, then I'm down to 8 wins. So.
Just slowly infecting them.
Okay. Yeah, you are.
Talk down to 6 wins.
I feel like I'm the only one. I'm really the only one who's like you're kind of picking around where they probably typically would like right around the average, like the over under for them on wins. But it's like I'm more higher on them because I'm not really seeing some of these teams really giving. Especially obviously they're not going to lose to. I don't think they're going to lose to Auburn at all.
I already said Penn State started 5-0. I mean,
so it's like
they started 5-0 last year. Finished 2-6.
Yeah, that's true.
I think they're going to go 4.
That's true.
Now they're going to go 4-1, and then they'll finish the season. Let's see, but how many games is that? 6-1 because they'll lose to Michigan, and I think they'll just get Ohio State because not exactly a great. Well, that'll definitely be a night game on ESPN.
See, I think Penn State could be a 10-win team. I really do.
Yeah.
Now, I agree. If they can't run the ball, it's going to be a completely different story.
If they can't run the ball,
but you look at it, you don't need to run the ball to beat Ohio. You don't need to run the ball to beat Central Michigan. You need to run the ball to beat Northwestern and Auburn and Purdue, and I think they'll be just fine in those games. Will they be tough? Absolutely. But they'll be just fine enough to win. I think they lose in Ann Arbor. They lose to Michigan. They squeak by Minnesota. They get beat by Ohio State. Then they go on, beat Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, and beat Michigan State to end the year. They need to beat Maryland by about 8 million if they wear their darn state flag helmets. I'll say that. Those things are ugly.
You're just a hater, Cade.
I am not.
Hater. But my question to you both then, I can understand your reasoning. Who they got on offense that's actually going to score points for this team?
That's the thing.
And they were
you
middle
look
of
at
the
their
road
defense.
defensively. They
you
were
look
middle
at Penn
of the
State.
road.
They could easily be middle of the road. It wouldn't surprise me. But I just don't think that highly of the Big Ten this year.
Tell me what Rutgers and Maryland and any of them have.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in the same boat as
Maryland has the other Tagovailoa, by the way.
Who has done what?
hey, he won them 7 games last year. That was an
Yeah,
improvement.
7 games. And I mean, Penn State won 7 games too.
Yeah.
But I just don't think Maryland's that great.
No,
They might lose to Central Michigan.
They might.
maybe.
To be fair, anything could
If
happen.
they lose to Central Michigan, they probably lost to
I just
Purdue
think-
and Auburn.
I just
Yeah.
think
To be fair, if they lost to Central Michigan, there are already way more problems
Yeah.
than everything else. Oh man! But could you imagine though for a second? Just imagine.
They start 0-4. That'd be great.
James Franklin gets fired and everyone
Oh.
rejoices.
You might get fired after 1 and 2. To be
There's
honest.
no way he gets fired if they sign that giant contract.
Right. Well, he's
I
probably
can't
got a massive
imagine what that. I
buyout.
can't
Oh,
imagine what that buyout is. This could be the
Find out.
first year after that contract, right? Or
I think
second?
so.
Okay.
First or second.
Yeah, so that buyout's gonna be massive.
They gave him such a big contract for him only having like 1 10-win
Yeah.
season.
Well, the problem was that Michigan State gave Mel Tucker a huge contract, so Franklin said, "Hey, we're gonna do something because
Yeah.
I got more."
Yeah.
That's true.
But looking at Michigan coming off an amazing year, winning the Big Ten, going to the playoffs. Don't ask them what happened to that Orange Bowl though. They won't talk
What
to you
a
about
Orange
that.
Bowl.
Exactly. What Orange Bowl they'll say. But they start the year with Colorado State at home. Then they get Hawaii, UConn, Maryland all at home. Then they go to Iowa. They enter Kinnick, one of the weirdly most difficult places to play in the Big Ten. Then you go to Indiana, get Penn State at home. Bye week, Michigan State at home. Go to Rutgers, get Nebraska and Illinois, and then go to Ohio State.
I hate to say this, but
So-
looking at their schedule, I mean, like, the only team that's going to give them any problems on this schedule would probably be Penn State and maybe just a weird game with Michigan State. This is before getting to Ohio State. Let's take for granted. They could, depending on how things go, this team could either go undefeated going into the final week or that final game with Ohio State, or they'll have like 2 or 3 losses when they get there. But I'm going to be ballsy. It's just their schedule looks so weak. And this
What,
is
you're
prob-
not scared of UConn?
the same thing, but I could also
Known
make,
powerhouse UConn?
but I could also make the case for Ohio State to kind of be a bit weak. Their schedule also being a bit weak, but that's here or there. But I'm going to say Michigan loses 1 game and they get pounded by Ohio State. That it just their schedule just overall is weak, and I think they get the tough game with Penn State and get one on them. Pretty much clear the rest of their schedule because just after Penn State, it's really not difficult since Michigan State. It's not gonna. I don't think is gonna be that competitive unless Michigan just does what they always do under Harbaugh, just lose to Michigan State for no reason.
Yeah, especially coming off the year they had. I'd fully expect them to get to at least 9 wins.
Their schedule's weak enough. I tend to agree with that right now. Although I've got some fun upsets. Once again, believer in Maryland, 10-win Maryland.
10-win Maryland.
Maybe not 10-win Maryland, but close. Yeah, they just, I mean, you say, okay, at Ohio State, that's probably a loss. Other than that, they're probably in every other game. I mean, even though they lost a ton defensively, this year's going to really be the test to say, okay, has Jim Harbaugh finally reached that level where Michigan's been trying to get to, where they could say, all right, we just reload and we go again. And the schedule's weak enough, you could probably, do that and
So,
convince people of it.
Offensively, they didn't really lose. I don't think they lost very much. So I think their offense it just depends who's going to be your quarterback because it's McCarthy and McNamara. So it's kind of weird battle there because I think McCarthy has a better ceiling than McNamara does, but McNamara's been the starter for them and has played most of that season. So it's just a matter of who's going to get it. And but I just the schedule is just is weak. Is that that's why I only see them only losing 1 game because Ohio State's going to be their real tough test. Iowa's going to be down, and Penn State's probably the only team that's going to give them a tough time. They could take one in Ann Arbor away from the Wolverines, but I don't know. But I'm obviously, like I said before, I have Penn State losing that game. So then it's really hard to say who else would give them any struggles. So they go 11-1, lose the final week.
I've got Michigan as a 10-2 team. I look at Not the Maryland game, Tyler, but the week after. Going to Kinnick.
Oh, no.
There's something about that classic Kinnick at night, and I think it gets them again in one of those weird, like, 12-10 types of games. Iowa blocks a punt for a safety in the third quarter, and that seals their fate. And then they have a shot at the playoff, maybe the Big Ten East, and then Ohio State takes care of business, and that is Michigan's season. I mean, 10-2 would be really good. You can ride Blake Corum. Maybe J.J. McCarthy could step up a little bit more. Cade McNamara, that quarterback battle will be fun the entire season. But I feel like that trying to figure out who your quarterback is, you can do that against Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn.
Oh, yeah.
Once you get to Maryland, and especially I think Iowa going on the road for the first time, if you don't have a guy by then, you're in for a way long season than you thought.
Yeah.
But one final team from the East we're going to talk about. We're going to start speeding this up because I realized we have officially gone for over 3 hours.
Yeah,
we are 2.5 conferences in. Michigan State, looking at them, Western Michigan, Akron, at Washington, Minnesota, at Maryland, Ohio State, Wisconsin, at Michigan, at Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana, and at Penn State to end the year. So if we could start, I guess, not 100% quick picking yet, but we're going to have to start speeding it up a bit.
I'd say best they go is maybe 7-6 or 6, not 7-5 or 6-6. I think they're going to be very down this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at about 7 wins. I'll go 7 wins.
7's where it's at. You lose Kenneth Walker. That's a lot of production that's hard to replace. But as we said before, Big Ten's easy enough. You might be able to squeak out more wins than you think.
That's true.
The back half of that schedule after Michigan, not the worst. I mean, you get the test at Penn State there at the end, but you pick up some of those wins. You should beat Western Michigan, Akron, and, maybe, unfortunately, Maryland, maybe.
Maybe. That's your one. I've got 7 wins for Michigan State as well.
Yeah.
I just don't think you beat that big 3. Excuse me. I think they lose to Wisconsin as well. And there's some other one they slip up. Maybe it is at Maryland. Maybe it's some weird game at Washington or Minnesota. But I think they find a way to slip up and get only 7 wins on the season. So moving over to Wisconsin, we're just going to jump the others in the East for right now. Maybe one day we'll get back to them. Maybe not. Who knows? Looking at Wisconsin, Illinois State, Washington State, New Mexico State, lots of state teams. At Ohio State, then Illinois, at Northwestern, at Michigan State, Purdue, bye week, Maryland, at Iowa, at Nebraska, and Minnesota to end the year.
I've got this team winning the West just because it's a weak West. We talked about that. I think this is a classic Wisconsin year. You find a star running back, you hand them the ball 30 times a game, you play stout defense. It's going to get you past pretty much everybody with the exception of, Ohio State. And then maybe one of those road games trips you up kind of later in the season, maybe Iowa, maybe Nebraska gets you, or midseason there, Michigan State. I'd say about 10 wins for them.
So I say 10 wins.
I'm going to say 9.
I'm going to say 10 as well. Looking at the next team to go to here, that would be Minnesota. Looking at them, New Mexico State, Western Illinois, Colorado, going to Michigan State, getting Purdue at home, bye week at Illinois, at Penn State, Rutgers at home, at Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, and at Wisconsin.
I'd say about 8-9 win season.
I was going to go 8.
We roll in the boat, 8 wins for Minnesota. They'll challenge for the West. They won't get there, but they'll challenge. Tanner Morgan back, one of the best, not great, but good quarterbacks in college football.
Yeah. We double row in the boat, 9 wins for Minnesota. I will one-up you on that one. But it should be a fun season again. I really enjoy what P.J. Fleck can do out at Minnesota. And hopefully many more boats are rowed out there. Looking at Nebraska, next game, they start the year in Dublin, Ireland against Northwestern. Again, coming back, North Dakota, Georgia Southern, Oklahoma, bye week, Indiana, at Rutgers, at Purdue, bye week again, Illinois, Minnesota, at Michigan, Wisconsin, and at Iowa. Can they not be 3-9 is the question.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So I'm gonna go 8 wins.
That's very, very generous. I was going to give them like 5 or 6 wins on the year. I think they just get to be bowl eligible.
I think they got very unlucky last year. I think they're bringing back a solid team, and I think they're able to get 8 wins. I mean, you look at their first 3. There's 3 wins right there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Then you get Indiana at home. I think that's 4, Rutgers 5, Purdue 6, Illinois 7, and then I think you can still win those final games.
Could you imagine the chaos if Nebraska goes into Ann Arbor undefeated? Oh, my Lord.
Scott Frost is the greatest coach of all time. Nebraska's back. It's the 90s. That's what would happen.
But no, I think for Scott Frost's sake, they better hope that's the scenario because if not, he's going to get canned by week 5. I mean, if they start out slow at all, right, if you get destroyed by OU and then you drop, one of the Indiana and Rutgers games, even at like 3-2, 3-3, all of a sudden you're going, hold on. I don't know. Scott Frost is the guy. So I say 7 wins.
Well, I would say, with the OU game, because OU lost a lot of talent from the portal or graduation or to the draft and have it. Well, I'd say some guys that they're trying to replace can step up in aspects. I'd say Nebraska, they're bringing more back and more in regards to talent. And I would say someone on paper, it's like OU last year on paper probably should have beaten the heck out of Nebraska, but that game ended up being close, and it was in Norman. Now it's in Lincoln. You could say it might go the other way for Nebraska, but I'm not going to give them that win.
Let me ask you this. If OSU went to Lincoln this year, would they be able to beat Nebraska?
Yeah.
Then OU would too. We're good. Let's go.
I think Nebraska is going to be an intriguing team in that they're going to shock a lot of people.
But I'm talking about OU had a more talented team last year and barely beat Nebraska.
More dysfunctional team, yes. That's for sure. Not this year.
I'd say it was less dysfunctional at the time.
One could argue that entire team was dysfunctional the second they got up 37-14 against Tulane. One could argue the season should have ended right there, and I would have been a happy person. But I think Nebraska starts 7-1, shocks nearly everyone, and then folds, gets beat by Minnesota, and begins the long. They begin the long descent to 7-5, and everyone begins to doubt themselves.
Oh, that'd be the worst.
That is my Nebraska take. And
actually, I think they could probably still win against Iowa, so I'd make that 8.
Maybe, but I believe in Iowa way too much.
They've got them at 7.5 wins over under. So that's what I'm saying. I think bowl eligibility is within reach for sure. Just because you got so many weak games, like you mentioned, Andrew. I mean, those first 3 are horrendous. I mean,
like you said, they better get bowl eligible. They got a lot of other shit.
Or they could just lose to North Dakota and throw that game and get everyone fired. They could do that too.
Scott Frost is like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, he's just like, you know what, coaching ain't for me. But moving on to Iowa being a pretty intriguing team. You are coming off winning the Big Ten West, despite your offense half the time, it felt like. Spencer Petras, I mean, he had an intriguing season to say the least. You look at Iowa, South Dakota State, Iowa State, Nevada, at Rutgers, Michigan, at Illinois, bye week, at Ohio State, Northwestern, at Purdue, Wisconsin, Minnesota on the road, and Nebraska at home.
I'd say 8-4 for this team.
I'm gonna go 9.
Yeah, I like about that 8-4 range, maybe 7-5. They lost Tyler Linderbaum, who was a rock steady guy on that offensive line, and they do a good job usually replacing and building up those guys. But I think it's going to be a real struggle offensively for them this year. So there's going to be some games that even though they should win, they probably take themselves out of because they just can't score points.
Yeah,
you got to be able to score some points.
I've got Iowa as an 8-win team. I think they do the same thing as Nebraska. They start strong and then fade late in the season, and it's going to make the Big Ten West race, I think, a lot of fun this year.
Going to probably be like how it was last year.
Yeah, it'll be crazy for sure. But moving on to the ACC, kind of continuing to speed this up, we might change the format up here. We're going to start with usually the favorite to win the ACC. That is Clemson. They did not win it last year, though. The big question for them, I mean, you change coordinators. Tony Elliott's gone. Brent Venables is gone. Can DJ Uiagalelei lead the Tigers on offense to do just enough that their defense can do their job? Because their defense did the job last year for the most part. They had an insanely great defense. They just couldn't do anything on offense. When you look at Clemson's schedule, they start the year at a neutral site game in Atlanta at Georgia Tech, and then get Furman, Louisiana Tech at home, go to Wake, get NC State at home, go to BC, go to Florida State, get Cuse at home, bye week at Notre Dame, Louisville at home, Miami, and South Carolina at home as well.
You guys can go first.
You ready for this one, Cade?
Maybe
9-win Clemson.
9-win
Dabo's
Clemson.
going to realize Venables, that's a tough guy to lose. That little stretch there they've got of Wake Forest, NC State, and Boston College is actually a lot trickier than I think people realize.
Yeah.
Those 2 road games are really tough. Wake Forest is going to have a top quarterback in the conference, Sam Hartman. Boston College has got their quarterback healthy, and we know they play a tough, hard-nosed defense. And then NC State, again, going to have one of the top quarterbacks in the conference in Leary. So that's going to be 3 really tough games. You'll know kind of by that, where they're at after that. I think they drop 1, maybe 2 of those, and then that Notre Dame game on the road is going to be a little tougher than, probably you think. And then Miami and South Carolina, that's not easy.
That ain't easy.
Say, for me, games they drop would be Notre Dame would be a given, because I think they'll drop a big one. Say NC, you know what? I'm gonna go NC State takes one, and then gonna give probably Miami gets one on them, so that's 9-3 right there.
Team Miami, Tyler Van Dyke, watch the film.
Believing in the Canes.
I do not trust
the reign of the Cane.
It's not that I like. First of all, for me, it's not me liking Miami.
Yeah.
It's mainly because DJ.
Connor, stop trying to bring facts into logic. Reign Cane.
That's right. We're just here pushing team propaganda.
Yeah, I'm just pushing the U propaganda. They got rid of the turnover chain. Now they can fully go back to the 2000s. The ghost of Ed Reed will be with them, even though he's still alive.
Which part of the 2000s are you talking about?
The first part.
They're going to upgrade and do the UNLV slot machine.
There you go. They should just summon an actual hurricane is what they're going to do. They're just going to bring out a weather machine and just start making it rain in Hard Rock. It'll be great. Just turn every game into a natural
don't
disaster.
Worry about the destruction outside the stadium.
No, don't worry about it. There's only going to be like 8 people at the game anyway. But you look at Clemson, and I agree with you, Tyler, that at Wake Forest, NC State, at BC, I would even throw at Florida State just because of how weird that environment can be nowadays, especially. I think they sneak a few of those wins. I think they just sneak by BC. Florida State might give them a run for their money. You never know. That might be Florida State's one game they wake up for this year. We see them do it. They do it a lot now. But I think they lose to NC State. That's my big shocker. Mm-hmm. They lose that game, and I think they go and lose at Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame will be ready by that point for a big game. I think they skid by Miami and South Carolina.
All right.
Those will be tough games. I've got Clemson winning 10 and the ACC. 11-2 ACC champ. They beat Miami in 2 close games in the ACC. But looking at the next team, I guess
you had Wake and NC State beating.
I had NC State and Notre Dame.
Oh, Notre Dame, okay.
But NC State's the next team I have, and NC State, I mean, it's the same thing, different year. They've got talent. You look at what the Wolfpack have. They've got Devin Leary. They've got a great defense. Who's he going to throw the ball to? That's the question.
That's the one question mark. We don't talk about receivers in the ACC. No, we don't do that.
But here's my bold one. NC State loses week 1 at East Carolina.
Oh, no.
Rivalry game in Greenville. No. The Pirates will be ready. And then they keep running. They upset Clemson. Just hear me out. This is the most NC State thing possible. They just keep winning. They have it, and then they lose to North Carolina at the end of the year, and it costs them the ACC.
And North Carolina gets to bowl eligible.
Yeah, North Carolina's 5-6. So NC State goes 10-2 and was so close, but they just screwed up at the end.
They do not. I'm sorry.
That's NC State football, though.
Cade is so true to their character. You convinced me. I agree with you.
No, it's like if they're what's going to happen is that they don't lose. They don't lose week 1. They pretty much go through everybody. What would be vary of them is to lose at home to Virginia Tech. and then they lose the game at North Carolina.
That is also acceptable.
It's like the 10-2. I didn't have an issue with. It was you saying they lose week 1.
But they always lose to East Carolina. That's like their MO. That is what they do.
Yeah.
They lose
to UConn. Okay.
Okay, that too. That actually would be more predictable. Actually, losing to Charleston Southern would be the most NC State.
Honestly, that's probably feel like UConn's a worse loss than Charleston Southern.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah, Charleston Southern's at least good. You lose to UConn, you lost to the worst football team that's also a basketball school.
Yes.
Just embarrassing. How dare you? But Tyler, I guess you said you agree with 10-win NC State.
I got no.
You're on board. It's the only acceptable horns. You ride the pack. That's their actual hand signal, though. It's okay because it's out here and not up here like Texas. As an OU fan, I'm okay.
It's like they just took that from the NWO.
Don't do horns up on this channel.
That wasn't horns up.
Unless you're doing horns up for peace. That's a good thing. No, that's USC. Horns Up for Peace is I guess I should explain myself with what Horns Up for Peace is. It's an Eddie Radosevich meme. I don't know if anyone knows who Eddie Radosevich is. He's a guy he's a radio guy for the franchise. And because when Horns Down became a thing and the Big 12 started penalizing, he started saying, okay, we got to do Horns Up for Peace. And so every time someone does a Horns Up, he's like, Horns Up for Peace. You got to save the Big 12 before we leave.
Okay.
That's his mission in life.
So,
among other things.
So three of us had 10, and Andrew had 9.
All right, so we're all in agreement of NC State.
They're still going to be one of the better teams in the conference.
They're going to do their thing.
So,
but looking at Wake Forest here, the Demon Deacons are going to be insane on offense. You look at what they're going to bring to the table. Sam Hartman coming back. Look at some of their receivers, A.T. Perry and Taylor Morin. They're going to have some fun targets to get the ball to. They start the year with VMI, the Keydets. Not the Cadets, the Keydets. Respect the troops. At Vanderbilt, Liberty at home, Clemson at home, at Florida State, Army at home. That's a trap game right there. Look out for Army. Bye week, BC at home, go to Louisville, go to NC State, North Carolina at home, Syracuse at home, and then going to Duke to end the regular season. So anybody.
I don't know how to feel about this team. I mean, they
went 11-3 last year.
I mean, what they brought to the table.
They won the division.
What they brought to the table offensively was really well done. But it's like looking at who I think they would lose to. It's like, now I'm making it seem like they're going to be better than NC State in regards to
they
how
might be.
They might be. That's the beauty of it.
But the thing is, I have NC State winning against them, so it's like, just because I'm like, hey, that's a good possibility right there. I mean, NC State's going to NC State, and Clemson going to Clemson.
If Wake Forest goes undefeated, my partner in crime, who's now getting ready to leave at K101, will never hear the end from me because I've been pushing the Wake Forest propaganda 10-win since Jamie Newman was there. So, like, if they go undefeated, it's on.
It's over.
I just don't know who they lose
Poor Trent.
to. Maybe NC State, but
NC State's the only team that would probably get them unless Clemson gets one on them. Even then, that's going to be a difficult one because it's really hard to trust that way the offense, especially who's behind under center. So I'd say they go 10-2 and either they somehow manage to get into the championship game or they just miss out because they lost to NC State.
I say they go 10-2 simply because just as much as we talk about some of those SEC teams being a little thin defensively and, giving up too much. Wake Forest was the Tennessee version of, the ACC side of that where they were run and gun. We score 40, but we give up, 37.
Yep.
So I think a team like Clemson and Boston College, specifically those two that could really force you into a different type of game tempo-wise are going to be problems for them. And so that's where I see the 2 losses coming. A 10-win Wake Forest.
I said for mine, it would have been they'd lose to Clemson barely, and then they would lose on a heartbreaker to NC State. Otherwise, they win every other game.
I got 10-win Wake Forest. They lose to NC State and Clemson, and it costs them. That's what I got. 10-win. Imagine this: 10-win Wake, 10-win NC State. Clemson still wins. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Clemson still wins the division.
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, except when it does, which like last year. But let's do a little bit of switching around here. Going over to Pitt, looking at the defending ACC champion, taking a look at some of the best teams in the Coastal, at least where we think they'll be. Pitt starting the year with West Virginia and Tennessee at home, 2 big home games right out the gate. Going to Western Michigan, Rhode Island at home, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, bye week at Louisville, at North Carolina, then Syracuse at home, going to Virginia, Duke, and then ending the year at Miami. Going to be a fun season for Pitt.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they respond without Kenny Pickett. Guess I'll go about 7 or 8 wins.
It's like I'm just kind of looking through that. At least in those first 2 games, they're either more likely to beat West Virginia or could steal one from Tennessee. Who knows on that one? Just kind of looking through their conference, they could easily go undefeated in conference play despite having maybe 3 losses, maybe two losses or whatever outside. Because I know they're not going to lose to Western Michigan or Rhode Island. The rest of their schedule.
You say that, but Western Michigan did beat them last year.
They
did give up 44 to Western Michigan.
Fair enough. I'll give you that one.
Maction. It's great.
I'm just going to say probably outside the first. I'm not going to count those first because that's going to be hard for me to really figure out who's going to actually how they're going to do outside of that. They could easily win all their conference games, like just looking at who they play.
I think they'll lose at Miami.
I've got this as more of a 500 team.
Yeah.
I mean, you lose Pickett, who was a Heisman contender, and then you lose the best receiver in the country. Now, if you lost one or the other, maybe you overcome that, but that's a lot to replace offensively. Tennessee, I don't think they get that one. Virginia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina, that stretch is kind of sneaky on them because you got 2 of those are road games, and I think those 3 teams are competitive with them. And then at Virginia, Miami, that puts you pretty much right at your 6 losses if you drop those 2, because I think Virginia's going to be better than people expect. And I definitely don't think they beat Miami. So that's kind of where I sit there. Just a bit more 500, probably bowl eligible, but
I'd say
unfortunately a step back.
Yeah. I think they'll win every conference game except Miami.
I look at Pitt.
I think they go 8-4 or 9-3.
I got Pitt as a 9-win team. I think they start the year with a win over West Virginia. They lose to Tennessee. They keep running. They get a good test from Virginia Tech, but fend them off. They lose at Virginia, and they lose at Miami. Brennan Armstrong's gonna deal some damage. Virginia's a team that we don't really talk about. They're the same way as Wake Forest. Great offense, not a great defense by any stretch of the imagination, but they'll make that game a shootout. And in Charlottesville, like Virginia, I think Pitt's going to be a solid 9-win team, but a little bit down considering what the expectation is from last year's team. But Kenny Pickett ain't walking through that door, though. Looking at Miami now, Tyler, I know this is our team. We have hyped them up probably way too much throughout this show. But you look at their schedule, Bethune-Cookman, Southern Miss, at A&M, Middle Tennessee at home, bye week, North Carolina, at Virginia Tech, Duke, at Virginia, Florida State, at Georgia Tech, at Clemson, and then Pitt at home. This is a favorable schedule for Miami, more in a combination of a weaker Coastal. A&M's your only big non-conference game. I mean, unless you lose to Southern Miss or Middle Tennessee, then you really got problems already for Mario Cristobal. But you look at Tyler Van Dyke, you look at Jalen Knighton, Will Mallory, Keyshawn Smith. You got a lot of options to go to on this team. You got Tyreek Stevenson commanding the defense, one of the better corners in the ACC. It's going to be a fun season, I think, for the Canes.
I know we've hyped them up, Cade. The only one problem I have for them really reaching that 10, win mark.
Yeah.
Is that I think out of the top contenders in the ACC, they've got the toughest set of road games, right?
Yes.
At A&M, at VTech, at Virginia, at Georgia Tech and Clemson are all pretty much no gimmies. I think Georgia Tech's probably the easiest of that group, but even still, that's a set of games that if you all of a sudden find yourself losing 2 or 3, now you've regressed back to like a 7-5 season.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's their biggest hurdle is can they perform on the road this season.
So what do you say? Do you think the record will be?
I'm kind of in between on them. I would like to think they could contend, and be up there at 9-10 wins, but I could also see a scenario like just like that where maybe you lose Clemson, Virginia, A&M, and Virginia Tech, and all of a sudden you're 8-4. So I would say somewhere in that 8+ win range. I don't quite think they get to 10 or 11, but I think they get close.
I'll give them 9 wins. I think they lose to A&M. They probably drop one to Virginia Tech and then to Clemson, but they win the rest of their games.
I'm going to go 9 wins, maybe 10 if they can steal that game at A&M or Clemson.
I'm going to go 10. I already said I think they beat Texas A&M. I think they lose one of the Virginias, whether it be Virginia Tech or Virginia, both of those being road games with how those teams are. Those are going to be tough games to win, but I think their other loss is to Clemson, and Miami wins a weak Coastal, and we begin the Miami is back hype train. Not saying it'll be justified, but hey, look at Tyler Van Dyke. He's a sophomore. Imagine that. But at one final team, I'm actually going to do something a little different. Take your pick. Do we want to go North Carolina or Virginia Tech? Who do we think's the better team to preview? I'll let you three decide.
Yeah, give me Mac Brown. Let's talk about Mac
Okay,
Brown.
we want to talk about Mr. I'll answer that for Chris. We can absolutely do it. That is a family meme between me and my dad. He quotes that nearly every other time I mention Mac Brown. It's hilarious. You look at North Carolina, starting the year with Florida A&M, they go to App State. We've already mentioned they can be a tough game, especially in Boone. That will be just such a fun game. At Georgia State as well. Bye week, Notre Dame at home, Virginia Tech at home, going to Miami, going to Duke, Pitt at home, at Virginia, at Wake, Georgia Tech at home, and ending the year with NC State at home on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do after a down year. I mean, there was a lot more expectations for them last year when they still had Sam Howell, and all of a sudden, things kind of fell off. So I'm interested to see how this Carolina team responds. I'll probably pick them at, you get 3 games you should win to start the year. I'll say about 6, maybe 7 wins.
Yeah, I'm riding that. They were 6-7 last year. They had Sam Howell, but they didn't have a lot of talent around them. This year, they have more talent, but they don't have their quarterback. So it's kind of like, it's catch-22 there. I don't think that Appalachian State game's a gimme. That might be a loss for me. They might start off 2-1 there. I don't think they'd be Notre Dame, VTech, Miami. And then after that, though, you kind of maybe pick up some more wins. Pitt could be one. I think you take one of those two between Virginia and Wake Forest, and I think you take Georgia Tech and NC State, that game rivalry, as Cade likes to say, anything could happen there. So I'd say about 6 for them.
I'd say 6-6.
I think they go 6-6. We're right on the money with that meme of 5-6 North Carolina upsets 10-1 NC State. I feel like that will happen. I know I will meme it into existence. And then finally, we've got to talk about the ACC's greatest team, Notre Dame. Everyone's favorite ACC team, technically in name only for every sport that's not football. We'll count them in here. Notre Dame starts the year at Ohio State, and then come home you get Marshall, Cal, at North Carolina. Bye week, BYU in Vegas. That's the Shamrock Series game this year. Sure, we'll get some interesting alternate uniforms for that game. Then Stanford and UNLV at home, going to Syracuse, Clemson at home, Navy, BC, and at USC. And that Navy game being played at Baltimore this year.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions coming in after getting rid of Kelly. Obviously, new coach coming in. How's he going to answer this? Obviously, a very, very, very tough first game. I know he coached the bowl game last year, but the first full season here, very tough game for him to start his tenure here. But overall, after that, I think they got a lot of favorable games here for him. So I still see them being in about 9. I'll go 10 wins with their losses going to. Actually, no, I could see them beat Clemson. I'll stay with 10 wins because I feel like they'll drop a game somewhere else outside of Ohio State.
I think for this one, their losses will be Ohio State, BYU. They win every other game on the schedule.
Well, actually, I'm not gonna lie, I missed USC down at the bottom.
I was about to say, do you beat USC and USC?
I'm gonna go 9 wins. I'm gonna drop that now.
Vegas has got.
USC's got to show me. I understand USC got all that transfer portal stuff. They still got to show it. They got to make it work. It's a Lincoln Riley team.
So they blowing a 20-point lead at some point.
I think they blow the lead to Notre Dame probably, but it's one of those things where USC, even it doesn't matter who the coach is at USC, they got to prove that talent's got to show up.
What was Clay Helton not good enough for?
Who's saying Notre Dame doesn't blow a 20-point lead?
That's true. Notre Dame could too.
Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
So they've got them. Yeah, the experts have 8.5 over under there. So I'd say 9's fair. That's probably where I wind up. I think you pull off a combination of you probably get one that you shouldn't against like either Clemson, USC, or BYU to kind of get you there. But I do see a world where if you lose to Ohio State, BYU, Clemson, USC, and then maybe you slip up against somebody like Boston College just randomly there, or at North Carolina early season, you wind up at 7-5. I think this team's lost a little bit more than people think in terms of just the key positions. That being said, though, I lean more towards 9, but I could also see a 7-5 mark in here.
When I look at Notre Dame, I see a team with a lot of question marks because I could see them being really good, and I could see them just in a bunch of one-possession games similar to last year, let the chips fall where they may and pray you get 10 wins. I think that strategy somehow keeps working for them. We saw it last year. Thankfully, they can't play a tight game with Toledo that comes down to the final 2 minutes. I think they lose to Ohio State. They lose to BYU in that Shamrock series. I think that's kind of BYU's coming out party to a lot of the world. And I think they ride the table after that. They upset Clemson at home. They go to USC. They win a fun game there. I think they'll be one of the few teams to contain Caleb Williams just a little bit.
That's just a Lincoln Riley hate pick right there.
That's really not.
Tell me
It's
USC.
really not.
It's really
They're
not.
not beating USC, guys.
I think they will.
USC is going to be double digits favorite.
That doesn't mean anything. USC will be good, but I don't think they'll be good enough to beat Notre Dame.
Notre Dame's got.
I really don't.
USC has to.
You can say it's a Lincoln Riley hate
I
pick if
see
you
that
want
smile.
time.
It definitely is.
We'll get to USC. I think they're a 10-win team. It's just I don't think they'll beat Notre Dame, and I don't think they'll beat Utah. That's it.
Well, see, we'll get to them.
Yeah, we'll get to them. They are one of the next teams to get to. But first, we'll just knock out the other important independent in a lot of people's eyes, BYU. We just talked about them a little bit. We keep mentioning them during this stream. And why is that? Well, just look at their schedule. They're all over the place. At South Florida, then Baylor at home, at Oregon, Wyoming and Utah State at home, Notre Dame in the Shamrock Series, Arkansas at home, at Liberty, ECU at home, at Boise, bye week, Utah Tech, and then at Stanford. So a lot of places to go for BYU this year.
So something to keep in mind. Last year, I mentioned at the beginning, they were undefeated. Injuries started happening to Jared Hall, and then they start getting some defensive injuries, and the season kind of derails there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The buzz around camp, if you check into some of the stuff for them, providing Hall stays healthy, people feel like this is going to be the best BYU team they've had maybe of the 2000s. Like, they feel that good about it. They did lose, a couple pair of running backs graduation, but really they bring back a lot of those playmakers at receiver, and then defensively they're pretty much stacked there. The one caveat is they've got a much tougher schedule this year than they did last year. Baylor, Oregon, Notre Dame as much as we make fun of it, Arkansas. And then, at Boise State is quietly kind of sneaky as well because Boise State, I think, will be back up. That being said, though, all in on the BYU train. Jared Hall is going to be a Heisman sleeper. I see them losing to Baylor, and that's it. I think they upset Arkansas. I think they take care of Notre Dame, and then I think they take care of Boise as kind of the last straw because they'll beat Utah Tech, and I don't think Stanford's very good. So give me 11-win BYU.
Alrighty.
I'm gonna go 8 wins. I think it's a very tough schedule. I don't think they beat Notre Dame. I don't think they beat Oregon. I don't think they beat Baylor. And that's a very, very, very late bye week for a team that battled injuries last year. So that is something to factor in as well.
I'm gonna be on the. I think they go 10. I think they go 10-2. I think they lose to Baylor, and they lose to Arkansas. That's the only teams they lose to. Everyone else they win.
That's what I've got as well. You lose to Baylor, you lose to Arkansas. Other than that, your only other real competitions at Oregon and Notre Dame. Boise will be somewhat of a challenge. I guess, I mean, Liberty would have been last year, but this year they don't have Malik Willis, so it's not really much of a game. Utah State's always a fun rivalry game to check out, that battle for the Beehive Boot. That is some fun stuff if you're into multiple team rivalries. The entire state of Utah gets in on it. But other than that, I think BYU's a 10-2 team. They have a pretty good year. They might finish top 15. You know, maybe if they shock a Baylor or Arkansas, they could maybe even be playoff contenders if you look at it the right way. But moving on to the Pac-12, the team everyone wants to talk about is USC. And, I mean, why wouldn't you? You have Caleb Williams. You have Travis Dye. You have Jordan Addison. You have Mario Williams. You've got one of the best offenses in college football. You really do. All through the portal, you got Lincoln Riley as your head coach. But do you have a defense, and do you have an offensive line? Those are the two questions that we don't really hear about a whole lot for USC, and that is going to be their Achilles heel. I mean, as an OU fan, I can tell you, you're going to get into a lot of shootouts. It's going to be painful. You're going to hate the defense, regardless of anything. Alex Grinch, I'm sure he's a good guy, but, man, some of his defensive decisions at times are intriguing. It's going to be fun to see, but as we say in the Big 12 now amongst OU fans, rush 3, drop 8, beat USC. They got shirts, Tyler. They got shirts. Rush 3, drop 8. That's the secret strategy.
Prevent defense.
Man. Yeah, it works.
I'd say going through, let's see, their first 6 games, all winnable. I think they pretty much win all those games. Utah will be the one where it'll be a reality check for USC. I think Utah does what OU fans want them to do and pound the crap out of them. Utah is just that much better than everybody in the
Also,
Pac-12.
by the way, I know we talked about OU fans earlier. Dakota chimed in and said OU's going undefeated, by the way. So I'm just saying,
Yep.
I'm not the craziest person, and neither is Tyler. We did it.
Just having fun.
Oh, I'm crazy. I'm just not the craziest.
Okay.
Then
there we go.
they win. The UCLA game will probably be the one where that could be a slip up, right there, because just how those games end up being a lot of the time because rivalry. But I'd say I'm going to give them 10. They go 10-2. Their losses would be to Utah and Notre Dame. That's it.
I'm tempted to go undefeated, but I'll go 11-1 losing to Utah right before the bye.
I can't believe me and Connor agree on something because on top of the Utah, which we all agree on, I quietly think that UCLA trip is a little bit sneakier. I got UCLA as my sleeper in that conference outside of, your Utah, USC. And so I'd still think 11-1. That being said, though, as mentioned, the UCLA game could be a trap. Also early, that Fresno State game, that's going to be a team that's going to be top in the Mountain West. We'll see. I don't think USC will win it just because they've got so much more talent, but that could be kind of an early wake-up call to say, okay, hey, we still got some things to work on.
Yeah. That's like, obviously the second loss for me is Notre Dame. UCLA could be that second loss or give them the third loss. But I still think they go 10-2 and they only have one loss in conference play, but they do not make the championship game. Because Utah and USC are in the same division, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so, I think, is Utah next or are we doing someone else?
We're doing Utah next.
Okay.
But I think USC goes 10-2. I think they lose at Utah and they lose to Notre Dame. Those are the two I've got them pegged with. I think they'll get into some weird close games. I could see, UCLA. That will probably be a competitive game. I really want to see how they do against Stanford. Even though Stanford is horrible, I just want to see that first road game. Am I praying for USC to go 0-12? Yes. Will it happen? No. If they lose to Stanford, will I do an emergency live stream where I laugh for 5 hours? Yes. It will be great. If they lose to anyone, it will be a great day for OU football. That's all I'm rooting for. May USC go 0-12 and score negative points. That's all I say.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I know. But looking at Utah, just an insanely fun team. Last year going to the Rose Bowl, Cam Rising coming back, looking at some of the players they've got. You've got Tavion Thomas at running back. You've got Clark Phillips at one of the corners, Cole Bishop at safety. This is going to be a good offensive and defensive team. What else would you expect from a Whittingham coach team? Starting the year at Florida, Southern Utah, San Diego State, at Arizona State, Oregon State, at UCLA, USC, bye week at Wazoo, Arizona, Stanford at home, going to Oregon and Colorado to end the year, and the quest to win the Pac-12 again.
I'm just looking at their schedule. Unless they just drop a random game out of nowhere, this team goes undefeated. I don't think they lose a game until, I don't know about the Pac-12 championship. Who knows what that? But as right now, I have them going undefeated in regular season.
Well, I think at UCLA would be the trap game, as you guys mentioned earlier, but I'm going to pick them to lose to Oregon. I think that's a trap game late in the year. You get 2 road games back-to-back with them in Colorado, coming off against Stanford. I think they drop the game to Oregon and finish 11-1 in the regular season.
And see, this Utah team is what they do well is that they're just physical, man. They're nasty, and that's something this conference in the Pac-12 does not have a lot of. There's not a lot of teams you just say are nasty. And the issue, though, and this is where you run into, you mentioned Oregon, USC is another one of these teams that you run into the issue. As much as Kyle Whittingham has developed those teams that he's coached, they just don't have the top-end pedigree talent. You know, they don't have the 4 or 5-star guy. And sometimes when you run into an environment like Oregon late season, when you know things are on the line, or even mid-season when you have a big showdown against USC, those stars are stars for a reason. They take over the game. So if Cade Williams goes balls out on you, there's not much you can do about it. If Bo Nix decides he wants to look back to his early Auburn form and just has a great game, there's sometimes not much you can do about that. I'd still say, you know, safely 10-2, 11-1. I think you drop either Oregon or USC, or you drop both. I think that's your deal there. I think they're a little bit too hard-nosed for UCLA, so I'm not quite as worried about that because that's their first real test game, if you will, in the season. We could talk about Florida at the top, but quite honestly, I think Florida's going to be still trying to get together a lot of stuff, so I'm not as worried about them going down there. But, so I'd say about 10-2, 11-1.
I'd probably say the game where if Oregon doesn't get one in the regular season on them, it'll be the championship game if Oregon doesn't beat Utah.
Right.
But I still think they'll go undefeated in regular season, and I'll coin flip depending on how far we are, depending on how the season is at that moment in time. I'll coin flip the Pac-12 championship game.
Well, Tyler, you've changed my mind. Going into this, I was going to pick, Utah goes 12-0, but I've changed it. They will go 11-1. They will lose at Oregon and then demolish them in the Pac-12 title game.
And
They will get their
that might get them into the
They will go
playoff.
12-1. They will be the number 4 team in the college football playoff, and then probably get murdered by Alabama. Sadly for them,
Probably.
that's what's gonna. Then they're gonna get beat a very physical 24-0 or something like that. But I think Utah is going to be just such a fun team to watch this year. They're physical. I know that's what you said earlier, Tyler. You see a lot of finesse in the Pac-12, a lot of speed, and size is not really a thing out there, but physical, just strong, just playing power football. That's what Utah loves to do, and they do it well. They do all the little things right. They're just a fun team to watch every single year.
The Pac-12 says, hey, we'll run around you. Utah says, no, we're running through you.
Yes, that is the
that's what it
difference.
is.
They are not the same. And UCLA is the next team up to talk about. I know we've already mentioned UCLA a little bit. They still have Zach Charbonnet at running back. They've got Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback. They've got Jake Bobo as their best wide receiver. They're going to be an intriguing team as well. UCLA's always in the mix. They went 8-4 last year. They got Bowling Green to start the year, Alabama State. That will be history made. The first time UCLA ever plays an FCS team.
Really?
They have never – UCLA and Notre Dame and I believe USC are the only 3 to never play an FCS team. So that will be changed. There'll be some history made there on a network no one can see because it's on Pac-12 Network.
Yep.
This is the way. South Alabama next, at Colorado, Washington, Utah, bye week, at Oregon, Stanford, at Arizona State, Arizona, USC, Cal on the road.
They go 5-0 into that game against Utah, and that's where they'll lose their first game off the bye week. I think they'll drop to Oregon, beat everybody else. I think they'll lose to USC. They go 9-3.
Yeah, I might agree exactly with that, actually. I think they go 5-0. Utah, they lose off the bye. I think Oregon's going to be a good team this year. And then, yeah, lose to USC.
I think I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I think Oregon's going to be the worst 9-3 team.
Yeah.
Everybody.
No, I agree with the 9-3 assessment there. I do think out of those three of Utah, Oregon, and USC, to your point of Oregon being the worst 9-3 team, I think of those three that you can most likely maybe steal to get to 10 wins, I think Oregon's the best shot. Even though you get USC and Utah home, we know with UCLA, there's no real home factor. It's not like they're a tough environment.
No.
The intimidating environment of the third full Rose Bowl.
Right. So that doesn't really matter. But, yeah, I'd say 9-3 pretty safe there. And then maybe if they're lucky, they could steal that Oregon game. But other than that, they're going to have a pretty good season, just not quite.
Yeah. I think we all agree on 9-3. This might be the first one we all 100% agree
so.
What
on.
about Kansas 12-0? No.
Yeah. Kansas will always be 12-0 in our hearts. They truly are the champions of life. But I agree. Utah, Oregon, USC, those are the three losses for UCLA, and they'll be close, but just can't get it done. But, hey, still more improvement for the Bruins. But looking at Oregon, the Pac-12 North champion from last year, Dan Lanny's got his work cut out for him game one. Going up against your former school and also the national champion. A lot to overcome there week one in Atlanta. Then you get Eastern Washington, BYU, at Wazoo, Stanford, at Arizona, bye week, UCLA, at Cal, at Colorado, Washington, Utah, and then finishing it up with a civil war at Oregon State.
I'm going to go 10-2, but I think they're very, very capable of winning 11 games. I think they lose to Georgia, but outside of that, I think they could run the table.
I've got them at 9-3, but only one loss in conference. I think they start 1-2.
Okay.
And there's going to be some panic, but then they'll right the ship. They'll roll through everybody. UCLA will be kind of a tough one, and then I think they lose to Utah there, towards the end of the season, and they finish with that one conference loss. Finish with the 10 wins, but in conference still as dominant as they were last year. Just you got a tough non-conference schedule. That's what it is.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tyler. Obviously, the two losses out the gate would be Georgia and BYU, and then they lose to Utah, and I have them losing to Utah. But every other game, it's going to be especially some of these bad teams in Pac-12 play. It's going to be unreasonably close for no reason because Oregon just does that for no reason, and but they'll still win those games. Then obviously lose to I think I still haven't getting smacked by Utah, but when we play for the championship game, I'm going to say that's a completely different Oregon team that's going to give Utah some trouble. But I'm still trying to figure out. I'm going to wait on who I think would actually do better because I'm kind of waiting for that season to start before I pick any championship game.
Well, where's the fun in that and trying to be reasonable?
I've got my playoff prediction ready. So
I've got Oregon going 10-2 in the regular season, and then Utah just has their way with them in the Pac-12 title game, giving them a 10-3, and still a pretty good season, about like what they did last year. And it's going to be a wild ride for Oregon. Bo Nix is going to worry that fan base and then somehow earn all the trust only to lose it again the next week. That's just what he does. He just makes plays. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. You don't really know with Bo Nix. Is he going to throw an amazing interception, slip out of 3 or 4 tackles, or is he going to get sacked and throw the ball behind him and lose 20 yards and maybe give up a scoop and score or something like that? But Oregon's going to be a crazy team to watch. They always are. Always such a fun, interesting team. But looking at the next team on our list from the North is Washington, who is trying to recover from the complete disaster that was last year's season. Getting beat by Montana at home was definitely a low point for them. 4-8 last year, but it is Kalen DeBoer's first year. The Fresno State head coach from last year takes over the Husky program, starting the year with Kent State and Portland State at home, getting a big non-con game Saturday night with Michigan State before getting Stanford at home, going to UCLA, going to Arizona State, getting Arizona at home, going to Cal, bye week, Oregon State, at Oregon, Colorado, and then at Washington State.
Yeah, I mean, they should take care of business to start the year. They get a trap game against UCLA. I think they'll drop. So I'm going to go about 7 wins.
I have 7-5 for them. The games they lose are Michigan State, UCLA. I have Arizona State getting one, and then I have Oregon State and Oregon getting the wins on them.
Yeah, I'm about 6-6, 7-5. They'll improve from 4-8 last year. They weren't that bad, but it's too much dysfunction going on with that school right now. So I just don't think they're quite at the top end of their talent.
I've got them going 6-6. They're going to get better, but it's going to take a while to try to rebuild them after what happened last year. I mean, they were at an absolute low point.
Yeah, I'd say give them about a couple seasons, and they'll be back to trying to compete for the Pac-12 title if there's still a Pac-12 left.
Yeah, say if they're still there and haven't
it's going to be
gone to the Big 12.
It's going to be back to Pac-10, but still they're going to be trying to compete.
If they haven't hitched a ride to the Big 10 or Big 12 already or somewhere. But the final team to talk about today, we're going to do another guessing game, or I guess I'll let you guys pick. Oregon State or Washington State? Which one is the more fun team? Both the little brothers to Oregon and Washington we've already talked about. Whichever one, they both went 7-6 last year. They both have quite amount of fun defense. Wazoo does have Cam Ward and DeZon Stribling on offense. Jalen McMillan, the big receiver for, not Jalen McMillan, that's Washington. We just talked about him. Damian Martinez, the big playmaker for Oregon State at running back. Oregon State? All righty. Looking at their schedule, they start the year with Boise, then going to Fresno State, Montana State at home, USC as well, going to Utah, going to Stanford, Wazoo at home, Colorado bye week, at Washington on a Friday night, Cal at Arizona State, and then Oregon at home in Corvallis.
That's a pretty tough schedule. I mean, Boise State's a tough game to start with. Fresno State's a tough game on the road there. USC is going to be a loss. Utah is going to be a loss. Oregon's going to be a loss there at the end. Arizona State could be a loss. I mean, you might be looking like a 3-4 win team here.
I'm not so sure about. I'm not really on that. I think their losses will be to Fresno State, USC, Utah, and Oregon. I just don't see, because mainly I'm right. The reason why I'm saying this is because I picked Oregon State to beat Washington. So of all those losses, so I'd say either they go 7-5 or 8-4. That's probably me being way too generous with them, but I think they're going to do better than what people think they will.
Yeah, I'm a little more on the down end. I think there's a legit chance they start out about 1-5. Like they could drop Boise State, Fresno State, USC, Utah, and then you're all of a sudden 1-5. You could right the ship with Stanford a little bit. I think Washington State's a tough game. You talk about Cam Ward there, Cade. That kid at Incarnate Word fellows through for 50 touchdowns and 4,700 yards last year, and he gets his offensive coordinator on the staff this year at Washington State. So that's a tough one. And then, you lose to Oregon. You pick up, though, Washington, Cal, and Arizona State just to, get some wins. But I think they're going to be battling at best for probably about a bowl berth. That's probably what they're looking at.
Like 5, 7, 6, and 6.
Right, yeah, right there.
That's a more reasonable. I just looked at some of the stuff, and I'm just like, I know some you guys have been a bit higher on Boise State, but I'm just kind of iffy with them because I don't know what exactly you're going to get out of Boise State when they should be playing better. Sometimes they just don't, so it's a bit.
Hank Bachmeier, baby.
So I think it's like I think Oregon State will just somehow sneak out games to get themselves around 7 or 8 wins. Are they going to win the big ones? No, but they're going to, I think, do better than what people think they will.
I think Oregon State, to me, they're a 5-7 team, and that's being kind of generous, giving them some of the wins. I think they start 1-4. They bounce back, beat Stanford, beat Colorado, lose to Wazoo. You're looking at a 3-5 team. Beat Washington, beat Cal. I just don't think they beat Arizona State or Oregon, and they get trapped.
Arizona State's horrible.
I know they're horrible. But I see them finding a way.
That's disrespectful, okay?
I see them finding a way in the desert to lose that game.
Oh, that would suck.
Arizona State. It could happen. It absolutely could happen. But I've decided that we're going to do one foul team. We're going to do Wazoo as a treat because they're such a silly team. every year. They're playing Idaho. They're not playing in the glorious Kibbe Dome that we all remember from NCAA
Then
games.
why are we talking about that?
Because it's the Battle of the Palouse, Tyler. We got to talk about Idaho at Wisconsin, Colorado State, Oregon, Cal, at USC, at Oregon State, bye week, Utah on a Thursday night in Pullman, and then at Stanford, Arizona State, at Arizona, and then Washington at home for the Apple Cup. They stormed the field last year in Seattle with that Apple Cup win. If Washington wins, do they storm the field in Pullman? That's a big question if they can win that
Them and
game.
their 2 fans will not, sir.
I'd say this team goes 5-7. It's like our main wins would be Idaho, Colorado State, Cal, and I'm going to say Arizona, and I picked them also beating Arizona State, but I have them losing the rest of their games.
I'm going to go 6 wins back at C7.
I'm going 8, boys. Give me Cam Ward. They're only losing to Oregon, Wisconsin, USC, and Utah. I think they take everything else.
I agree. I believe in Cam Ward.
Oh, my goodness.
8-4 Wazoo. This is why I wanted to talk about them because I couldn't remember Oregon State's schedule, and then I saw that they were like a 5-win. I was like, screw it, we're throwing Wazoo in here to end it. But I believe in Cam Ward. Like I said, he's a good quarterback. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the Pac-12. He's got at least a wide receiver to throw to. That's always a plus out there. It's not going to be the same crazy offenses we were all used to under Mike Leach, obviously. And Washington State fans have figured that out by now. But you look at this team, and, I mean, they could compete for the Pac-12 North. They really could. There's no reason they couldn't, but I guess we will find out.
The reason why they're not going to is because Oregon's just going to run away with it in the North.
Unless Oregon does what they should have done last year and lose to Cal and every other
they
team under the.
They lost over half the teams they played in the Pac-12.
They really should have, but I mean, I don't know. That's the beauty of college football, I guess. There's so many games that you should lose, but you just find a way to survive. And man, I don't understand how it happens sometimes. I really don't. But that will do it for today. Looking at it here, we are just almost at 4 hours. Officially the longest show in the history of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. I know, Andrew, we were joking a few weeks ago, maybe we'll get the shortest show. Hey, it's July, nothing's really going on. Maybe we'll get in here 30 minutes or so, do a little show, and then we'll be done. But here we are at nearly 4 hours of college football coverage. My goodness, it is 11:15 at night. I honestly did not expect us to go this long. I thought we would have been done a little bit ago, but that's what happens. Time flies when you're having fun, and it has been fun. Also, score update on the Hall of Fame game. It ended a while ago, 27-11. The Raiders win because everyone cares about this preseason game. Football's back, baby. For Connor Gray, Andrew Santangelo, and Tyler Riggs, I am Cade Kennedy. Have a wonderful night if you're still listening. Also, please go to bed. It is 11:15. What are you doing? All righty. Until next time, have just a wonderful time, everyone.